The moment Scarlett Vaughn saw her husband's face through the crack of hotel room 412, she knew her marriage was over, but she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She walked away with her head held high, only to stumble into the most dangerous man on the West Coast, a man who built his empire on blood and loyalty, a man who looked at her like she was the only thing worth conquering in a world he already owned. Sometimes betrayal doesn't break you. Sometimes it leads you straight into the arms of power. If you're hooked, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent hallway lights of the Grandview Hotel buzzed with a mechanical hum that made Scarlett's headache worse. She stood outside room 412, her hand hovering over the door handle, phone clutched in her other hand with the text message still glowing on the screen. "Mrs. Vaughn, I thought you should know. Room 412. I'm sorry." The message had come from Lisa, the front desk manager Scarlett had befriended during the charity fundraiser last month. No explanation, no context, just a room number and an apology that felt like a punch to the gut. Scarlett's reflection stared back at her from the brass room number plate. Designer dress, perfectly styled blonde hair, makeup that had taken 40 minutes that morning. She looked like a woman who had everything. She felt like a woman standing on the edge of a cliff. Her hand closed around the handle. Cold metal. Solid. Real. She turned it. The door swung open and time seemed to fracture into slow motion. Ethan stood in the middle of the room, his shirt half unbuttoned, his face cycling through shock, guilt, and something that looked almost like relief. Behind him, emerging from the bathroom in a hotel robe, was Rebecca Chen, the associate from his law firm, the woman Scarlett had made small talk with at office parties, the woman who had complimented her earrings just 2 weeks ago. "Scarlett," Ethan's voice cracked on her name. "This isn't, don't." The word came out sharp, cutting through whatever excuse was forming on his lips. Scarlett stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with decisive precision. "Don't insult me by pretending this is anything other than exactly what it looks like." Rebecca had gone pale, clutching the robe tighter around her body. She looked young suddenly, vulnerable in a way that made Scarlett feel ancient. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? Years? "Baby, please." Ethan moved toward her, hands outstretched like he was approaching a spooked animal. "We can talk about this. We can work through this." Scarlett laughed, a sound that surprised even her with its bitterness. "Work through this?" "Ethan, I just caught you in a hotel room with another woman. There's nothing to work through. There's just the truth, finally out in the open." "You're always so cold," Ethan said. And there it was. The accusation that had been building for months, maybe years, so focused on your career, your charity work, your perfect image. "When was the last time you actually looked at me? Really looked at me?" The words should have hurt. They were designed to hurt, crafted to shift blame, to make his betrayal somehow her fault. But standing there in that hotel room, watching her husband of 5 years try to justify his infidelity, Scarlett felt something unexpected wash over her. Clarity. "You're right," she said quietly. "I haven't really looked at you in a long time. Because if I had, I would have seen this coming. I would have seen that the man I married, the one who promised to build a life with me, had already checked out." She pulled off her wedding ring, the 2-carat diamond he'd saved 6 months to buy, the symbol of promises that now felt like pretty lies. She set it on the dresser with a soft click that echoed in the silent room. "My lawyer will contact you tomorrow," she said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "I want a divorce." "Scarlett, wait." But she was already walking away, her spine straight, her head high, leaving behind the wreckage of her marriage with the same grace she'd brought to every other performance in her carefully constructed life. The ocean wind whipped Scarlett's hair across her face as she stood on Maya's Malibu balcony 3 days later, staring out at the Pacific stretching endless and dark under the twilight sky. Behind her, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could hear her best friend moving around the kitchen, the clink of wine glasses, the low murmur of a jazz playlist. "You're going to freeze out here," Maya said, sliding the door open and stepping out with 2 generous pours of red wine. She handed one to Scarlett, then wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Talk to me. Real talk, not the brave face you've been wearing since you showed up at my door." Scarlett took a long sip of wine, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "I should be devastated," she said finally. "I should be crying, eating ice cream in my pajamas, listening to sad breakup songs. That's what you're supposed to do when your marriage ends, right?" "There's no supposed to," Maya said gently. "Everyone processes differently." "I feel free, Maya." Scarlett turned to face her friend, searching her expression for judgment and finding only understanding. "Is that wrong? 5 years of marriage ends in a hotel room, and instead of feeling broken, I feel like I can finally breathe." Maya squeezed her shoulder. That tells you everything you need to know about the marriage, doesn't it? I think I knew, Scarlett admitted, the words spilling out like a confession. Not about Rebecca specifically, but that we were dying. Slowly, quietly, dying. We stopped really talking months ago. Stopped touching except when we were supposed to, at events, in photos. We became this perfect picture of a successful couple, and somewhere in all that performance, we forgot to actually be people who loved each other. So what now? Maya asked. What does Scarlett Vaughn do next? Scarlett looked out at the ocean again, at the vast possibility of it. I have no idea, she said, and smiled. And that feels absolutely terrifying and absolutely right. The Meridian restaurant sat perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, all glass walls and modern architecture, the kind of place where reservations required a month's notice and a healthy bank account. Maya had insisted on taking Scarlett out, claiming that wallowing, even free-feeling wallowing, wasn't allowed past day 3. You need to remember you're a catch, Maya had said firmly. Ethan was a fool, and you need to be around people who appreciate excellence when they see it. Now sitting at their table near the windows, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, Scarlett felt almost normal, almost like a woman enjoying dinner with her best friend, not a woman whose entire life had imploded 72 hours ago. Don't look now, Maya said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But there's a man at the bar who hasn't taken his eyes off you since we sat down. Scarlett's first instinct was to ignore it, to keep her focus on her wine and the safe haven of Maya's company. But something, curiosity, defiance, the reckless feeling of having nothing left to lose, made her glance toward the bar. He sat alone at the far end, a tumbler of what looked like whiskey in front of him, untouched. Dark suit, perfectly tailored, black hair styled with casual precision, strong jaw, olive skin, and eyes that even from across the room seemed to hold weight. The kind of eyes that had seen things, done things, understood things that most people never would. When their gazes met, he didn't look away, didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't perform any of the usual rituals of acknowledgement. He simply watched her with an intensity that should have felt invasive, but instead felt like recognition. Who is that? Scarlett asked, forcing herself to break eye contact and turn back to Maya. Maya's eyes had gone wide. You don't know? Should I? That's Dominick Romano. Maya leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. He owns half the commercial real estate on the West Coast. Hotels, restaurants, nightclubs. This restaurant is his, actually. Scarlett processed that information, her mind cataloging details. Romano, Italian surname, the controlled way he held himself. The deference she'd noticed from the staff when she'd glanced his way. He looks young to have built that kind of empire. He's 36, Maya said. And there are rumors. What kind of rumors? Maya hesitated, glancing around like she was afraid of being overheard. The kind that says his empire wasn't built entirely on legal foundations. That his family has connections. The serious kind of connections. Mafia. The word hung unspoken between them, heavy with implication. That's probably just gossip, Scarlett said, but even as she spoke, she felt the lie in it. There was something about the way Dominick Romano commanded space, the way people moved around him like he was a gravitational force, that suggested power of a different magnitude than simple business success. Probably, Maya agreed, but she didn't sound convinced either. They finished their meal, the conversation drifting to safer topics. Maya's upcoming gallery showing, Scarlett's plans to look for a new apartment, the logistics of divorce proceedings. But Scarlett felt Dominick's presence like a physical thing, an awareness that prickled at the back of her neck. When the check came, their server, a polished woman in her 30s, smiled apologetically. Mr. Romano has taken care of your meal, she said. He wanted to welcome you to the Meridian and hopes you'll visit again. Maya's eyebrows shot up. Scarlett felt heat rise to her cheeks. Not embarrassment, but something closer to challenge. Please thank Mr. Romano, Scarlett said carefully. But tell him that while I appreciate the gesture, I prefer to pay for my own meals. The server blinked, clearly not accustomed to anyone refusing Dominick Romano's generosity. Of course, Ms. Vaughn, Scarlett corrected, the new title still feeling strange on her tongue. Scarlett Vaughn. As they left the restaurant, Scarlett allowed herself one more glance toward the bar. Dominick Romano was standing now, and for the first time since she'd noticed him, the corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile, more an acknowledgement of an interesting move in a game she hadn't realized they were playing. The next morning, Scarlett woke in Maya's guest room to her phone buzzing with an unfamiliar number. She considered letting it go to voicemail. Her lawyer had strict instructions to handle all communication with Ethan, and she wasn't in the mood for condolence calls from well-meaning friends. But something made her answer. Ms. Vaughn? The voice was female, professional, warm. My name is Caroline Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Dominick Romano. Do you have a moment? Scarlett sat up, suddenly very awake. Mr. Romano has my number? Mr. Romano has a way of acquiring information he needs, Caroline said, and there was a smile in her voice. He'd like to meet with you this morning if you're available. It's regarding a business opportunity. What kind of business opportunity? He'd prefer to discuss it in person. I can have a car pick you up at 10, if that's convenient. Every rational part of Scarlett's brain screamed that this was a bad idea. She knew nothing about Dominick Romano except rumors and the way he'd watched her across a restaurant. Meeting with him, alone, about some mysterious business opportunity was the kind of decision that led to complications she definitely didn't need while her divorce was still fresh. But the same reckless feeling that had made her look back at him last night rose up again, stronger this time. Text me the address, Scarlett said. I'll drive myself. The address led her to a luxury hotel overlooking the marina, the Aquarius Grand, all modern glass and steel rising 30 stories above the waterfront. Scarlett had attended events here before, charity galas and networking functions, but she'd never paid attention to who owned it. Now, standing in the marble lobby, watching the efficient choreography of staff attending to guests, she understood that this was Dominick Romano's kingdom. Caroline Chen met her at the private elevators, a slim woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. Ms. Vaughn, thank you for coming. Mr. Romano is waiting in the penthouse conference room. The elevator ride was smooth and silent, giving Scarlett time to question her sanity. What was she doing here? What could a man like Dominick Romano possibly want with her? The doors opened directly into a conference room that was somehow both intimidating and breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the marina, boats bobbing in their slips like white birds. The furniture was expensive but understated. A large conference table, leather chairs, abstract art that probably cost more than her car. Dominick Romano stood at the windows, his back to her, hands in his pockets. He'd traded last night's suit for charcoal gray, equally well-tailored. When he turned at the sound of the elevator, Scarlett felt the same shock of recognition she'd experienced at the restaurant. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall, at least 6'2", broad shoulders that the suit couldn't quite civilize, dark eyes that tracked her movement across the room with predatory focus. Ms. Vaughn, he said, his voice deep and measured. Thank you for meeting me. Mr. Romano? Scarlett extended her hand, refusing to be intimidated. His handshake was firm, warm, and lasted exactly the appropriate length of time. Professional. I'm curious about this business opportunity. Direct, he said, and something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. I appreciate that. Please, sit. They sat across from each other at the conference table. Caroline poured water from a crystal pitcher, set a folder in front of Dominick, then disappeared with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew when her presence was no longer required. I'll be equally direct, Dominick said, opening the folder. In 2 weeks, I'm hosting a charity gala here at the Aquarius Grand. 300 guests, most of them significant donors to various causes. The event director I hired quit yesterday. Creative differences with my head of security. And you want me to replace her? Scarlett kept her voice neutral, even as her mind raced. You know I have experience with event planning? I know everything about you, Ms. Vaughn. He pulled out a paper from the folder, slid it across the table. It was a detailed summary of her professional history, her degree in communications, her work coordinating fundraisers for the Children's Hospital Foundation, her volunteer positions on various nonprofit boards. I know you orchestrated the Coastal Conservation Gala that raised $3 million last year. I know you have an eye for detail and a talent for managing difficult personalities. Scarlett scanned the paper, then looked up at him. This is thorough. Some might say invasively thorough. I don't make important decisions without information, Dominick said. And this is an important decision. This gala represents relationships I've spent years building. I need someone who can handle pressure, who understands the stakes, who won't fold when things get complicated. And you think I'm that person? Based on what? Exactly. Based on the fact that you walked into that restaurant last night holding yourself together with nothing but will and pride, Dominick said, his voice softer now but no less intense. Based on the fact that when I offered to pay for your meal, something people usually accept without question, you refused. Based on the fact that you're sitting here now, asking hard questions instead of being intimidated by me. The honesty caught Scarlett off guard. She'd expected smooth sales tactics, veiled manipulation, not this direct assessment of her character based on observations she hadn't realized he was making. Why does your head of security have creative differences with event directors? She asked. Dominick's mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, but close. Marcus takes his job very seriously. He has protocols he won't compromise on, and some people find that restrictive. Protocols for what exactly? For keeping people safe. Dominick leaned back in his chair, studying her. I won't lie to you, Ms. Vaughn. My business interests attract attention, not all of it friendly. Any event I host requires serious security considerations. There it was. The acknowledgement of the rumors Maya had mentioned. Not explicit, but clear enough. Are you asking me to plan an event where people might be in danger? Scarlett asked. I'm asking you to plan an event where every possible precaution will be taken to ensure no one is in danger, Dominick corrected. But I need someone who can work within those constraints without panicking. Someone who can make the security feel invisible while keeping the elegance intact. Scarlett looked out at the marina, at the boats swaying gently in their slips. She thought about her empty apartment waiting for her after the divorce was finalized. Her calendar, suddenly bare of the social obligations that had come with being Ethan's wife. The charitable work she loved, now tainted by memories of standing next to him at events, smiling for cameras while their marriage rotted from the inside. This was an escape, a distraction, a chance to prove to herself that she could still do excellent work, that Ethan's betrayal hadn't diminished her capabilities. It was also, she suspected, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with security threats. What's the pay? She asked. Dominick named a figure that made her blink. It was more than generous, it was almost insulting in its excess. That's too much for 2 weeks of work, she said. That's what the work is worth to me. Dominick pulled out another paper, a contract, she realized. Plus a completion bonus if the event meets my standards, which, I should warn you, are high. Scarlett picked up the contract, scanning the terms. It was straightforward, professional, surprisingly reasonable in its expectations. No red flags, no hidden clauses that made her lawyer instincts tingle. I'll need full authority over vendors, design, and program, she said. If your head of security has issues, he brings them to me and we work it out together. I won't have someone undermining my decisions behind my back. Agreed. And I want it in writing that this is a professional relationship, no expectations beyond the event itself. Something flickered in Dominick's eyes. Amusement, maybe, or respect. You think I'm hiring you for reasons other than your qualifications? I think you're a man who's used to getting what he wants, Scarlett said bluntly, and I think the timing of this offer, right after my very public separation, might not be coincidental. Dominick was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up a pen, wrote something in the margin of the contract, and initialed it. When he slid it back to her, she saw the addition. This agreement is based solely on professional qualifications and performance. No personal obligations implied or expected. Better? He asked. Scarlett read the addition twice, then looked up at him. Why did you really offer to pay for dinner last night? Because you looked like someone who needed to know that not all men are careless with valuable things, Dominick said quietly. And because I wanted to see if you'd accept it. The fact that you didn't told me you were exactly who I needed. It was, Scarlett thought, either the most manipulative thing she'd ever heard or the most honest. Possibly both. She picked up the pen and signed the contract. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of vendor meetings, site inspections, and late-night planning sessions. Marcus Delgado, Dominick's head of security, turned out to be a former Marine with the intensity to match. But once Scarlett proved she could handle his protocols without compromising the event's elegance, they developed an efficient working rhythm. You're good at this, Marcus said one afternoon, watching her coordinate the setup of the grand ballroom. Most people fight me on everything. You find solutions. That's because I understand that your job is to keep people safe, Scarlett said, checking her tablet where the seating chart was displayed. My job is to make them feel celebrated while you do it. Those aren't opposing goals. Dominick himself was a constant presence, not hovering, but available. He'd appear at odd hours, ask incisive questions, then disappear to handle his other empire. Scarlett learned his patterns. He drank espresso at 7 a.m., took calls in Italian when dealing with family business, and had a habit of standing at windows when he was thinking. She also learned that people were afraid of him. Not overtly, no one cowered or stammered, but there was a careful respect in how his staff interacted with him, a measured distance that spoke of power differentials she couldn't quite map. Mr. Romano wants to see you, Caroline said one evening, appearing at Scarlett's makeshift office in one of the hotel's conference rooms. Rooftop terrace. Scarlett found him on the private terrace adjacent to the penthouse, the city sprawling below them in a carpet of lights. He stood at the railing, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, the most casual she'd seen him. Everything okay? She asked, joining him at the railing. I wanted your opinion on something, Dominick said. Not as my event director. As someone whose judgment I trust. The admission surprised her. We've known each other 2 weeks. I'm a good judge of character. He turned to face her fully. I have a donor who wants to bring a +1 who wasn't on the original guest list. Normally that wouldn't be an issue, but this particular +1 is a journalist known for writing exposés on business practices. And you have business practices you'd prefer not exposed, Scarlett said. I have business practices that are none of their concern, Dominick corrected, but I also have donors who value their privacy. If this journalist writes something inflammatory, it could damage relationships I've spent years building. So uninvite the donor. The donor contributes significantly to children's cancer research. Uninviting him means that research loses funding. Scarlett considered this ethical maze. Let the journalist come, she said finally, but have Marcus brief the staff on maintaining discretion. Make sure conversations happen in areas with ambient noise that makes recording difficult. And seat the journalist at a table with your most boring, by-the-book donors. If there's nothing scandalous to observe, there's nothing scandalous to write. Dominick studied her for a long moment. You understand how to navigate complicated situations. Well, I spent 5 years married to a lawyer who cared more about appearances than truth, Scarlett said. I learned a lot about managing perception. Is that what ended your marriage? Perception management? The question was too personal, crossing the professional boundary Scarlett had insisted on. She should have deflected, changed the subject. Instead, she found herself saying, what ended my marriage was realizing I'd become a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect accessory for Ethan's perfect career trajectory. And somewhere in all that perfection, I lost track of who I actually was. And who are you? Dominick asked quietly. I'm still figuring that out. Scarlett looked out at the city lights. But I know I'm not someone who'll ever be an accessory again. Good, Dominick said. Accessories are replaceable. You're not. The compliment settled in her chest, warm and unexpected. This was dangerous territory, personal conversation with a man who made her hyper-aware of every breath, every gesture. A man whose attention felt like standing too close to a fire. I should get back to work, she said, even though it was nearly 9 p.m. and she'd been working since dawn. Scarlett. Her name on his lips stopped her mid-turn. I want you to know something. That clause in the contract, the one about professional boundaries. I meant it when I wrote it, and I still mean it. But I also want you to know that if those boundaries ever change, if you ever want them to change, the decision is entirely yours. I won't push. I won't pressure. I won't use this professional relationship as leverage. Scarlett's heart hammered against her ribs. Why are you telling me this? Because you've been hurt by a man who made you question your worth, Dominick said, and I want you to know that whatever happens between us, professionally or otherwise, you hold all the power. I won't take that from you. It was, she thought, exactly the right thing to say and exactly the wrong time to say it. Because standing there on that rooftop, with the city lights reflected in his dark eyes, Scarlett wanted to close the distance between them. Wanted to know if the intensity she felt crackling in the air was mutual or just her own loneliness finding dangerous outlets. Instead, she did what she'd learned to do best. She maintained control. Thank you for being clear, she said. I appreciate the honesty. Then she walked away before she could make a decision she wasn't ready to defend. The night before the gala, Scarlett worked until 2 a.m. making final adjustments to the seating chart, confirming vendor deliveries, triple-checking Marcus's security protocols. When she finally collapsed in the hotel room Dominick had insisted she use, "You'll be here until midnight anyway, you might as well not drive home," exhaustion hit her like a physical force. She dreamed of hotel rooms and wedding rings left on dressers, of Ethan's face cycling through guilt and relief, of dark eyes watching her across crowded spaces, seeing things she hadn't meant to reveal. Her phone woke her at 6 a.m., Maya calling with a pep talk and a reminder that she was brilliant and capable and didn't need any man's validation to prove it. How are you feeling? Maya asked. Terrified, Scarlett admitted. This event is enormous, Maya. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. You've planned this down to the minute. You've got backups for your backups. You've even won over scary security Marcus, which I didn't think was possible. What if Dominick's disappointed? Maya was quiet for a beat. This isn't really about the event, is it? Scarlett closed her eyes. I don't know what it's about anymore. Yes, you do, Maya said gently. You're falling for him. The scary Mafia boss who looks at you like you're the most fascinating person he's ever met. He's not. The Mafia thing is just rumors. Scarlett, honey, I love you, but you're a terrible liar. Maya's voice softened. And I'm not judging. I'm just saying be careful. Men like Dominick Romano don't play by normal rules. I know. Scarlett opened her eyes, staring at the ceiling. I know exactly how dangerous this is. But you're doing it anyway. I haven't done anything, Scarlett protested. Not yet, Maya said. But you will. Because you're not the same woman who walked out of that hotel room 3 weeks ago. You're remembering who you are. And that woman doesn't play it safe. After they hung up, Scarlett lay in bed thinking about transformation and risk and the difference between recklessness and courage. Thinking about Ethan's face when she'd left her ring on the dresser. Thinking about Dominick's quiet promise that all the power was hers. Thinking about what she wanted, maybe for the first time in years. The gala began at 7 p.m. with golden light spilling through the ballroom's crystal chandeliers and the murmur of 300 influential voices blending with string quartet music. Scarlett stood in the wings, tablet in hand, coordinating the careful choreography of servers and speakers and surprise performances. Everything was perfect. The floral arrangements she'd spent hours selecting. The menu she'd curated with the executive chef. The program that balanced entertainment with meaningful acknowledgement of the donor's impact. Dominick appeared at her elbow, devastating in a black tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "It's extraordinary," he said quietly. "Everything you promised and more." "The night's not over yet," Scarlett cautioned, but pride bloomed warm in her chest. "Come with me," he said. "There's someone I want you to meet." He led her to the main floor, navigating through clusters of guests with the ease of a man who owned the space. People parted for him automatically, some with smiles, some with careful nods, all with respect that bordered on reverence. "This is Senator Mitchell," Dominick said, introducing her to a silver-haired man in his 60s. "Senator Scarlett Vaughn, the mastermind behind tonight's event." The senator shook her hand warmly. "Ms. Vaughn, this is the most elegantly executed fundraiser I've attended in years. You have a remarkable gift." They talked for several minutes, about event planning, about the causes being supported tonight, about the senator's own foundation work. Scarlett found herself relaxing into the conversation, finding her footing in this world of power and influence. As the senator moved on to greet other guests, Dominick leaned close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated. "You belong here," he murmured, "in case you had any doubts." "I never doubted my professional abilities," Scarlett said. "I wasn't talking about professionally." His hand found the small of her back, a touch that could have been courteous guidance through the crowd, but felt like a brand even through layers of fabric. "Dance with me." It wasn't really a question, but Scarlett found herself nodding anyway. He led her to the dance floor where other couples swayed to the quartet's interpretation of a classic standard. When he pulled her into position, one hand on her waist, the other cradling her hand with surprising gentleness, Scarlett felt the room narrow to just the two of them. "You're good at this," she said, focusing on the mechanics of the waltz to avoid focusing on the heat of his body close to hers. "My mother insisted all her sons learn to dance properly," Dominick said. "She said it taught discipline and respect." "How many brothers do you have?" "Two, both involved in the family business." He guided her through a turn with fluid precision. "Both married with children, both living the life our parents envisioned." "And you?" "I lived the life I built." His eyes held hers. "No apologies. No regrets. Until now?" Scarlett asked, reading something in his expression she couldn't quite name. "Until now," he agreed quietly. The song ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Scarlett knew she should step away, return to her coordination duties, maintain the professional distance that was increasingly feeling like a fiction they were both pretending to believe. But before she could move, Marcus appeared at Dominick's shoulder, his expression tight. "Boss, we have a situation. Conference room. Now!" Dominick's entire demeanor shifted, from the man who'd been holding her on the dance floor to something harder, more dangerous. "Scarlett, stay with Marcus. Don't leave this ballroom." "What's happening?" "Probably nothing," Dominick said, but his eyes said otherwise. "Marcus will explain. I'll be back soon." He disappeared into the crowd with the kind of speed that suggested years of practice at emergency exits. Marcus moved closer, positioning himself between Scarlett and the room like a human shield. "Ms. Vaughn, I need you to act normally," he said quietly. "Smile, mingle, keep the event running exactly as planned. Can you do that?" "Not until you tell me what's going on," Scarlett said. Marcus hesitated, clearly weighing what to share. "We received intel about a potential threat. Not to the event itself, but to Mr. Romano. Someone who wants to send a message." "What kind of message?" "The kind that ruins reputations and destroys careful alliances." Marcus's expression was grim. "Mr. Romano has enemies who can't touch him directly, so they look for pressure points. Tonight, with all these influential people gathered, represents opportunity." "For what?" "For making him look weak, for embarrassing him publicly, for undermining the relationships he's built." Marcus scanned the room constantly as he spoke. "Your job is to make sure that doesn't happen. Keep this event perfect. Don't let anyone see that anything's wrong." Scarlett felt her pulse kick up, but with it came a strange calm. The same feeling she'd had in hotel room 412, looking at her husband's guilty face. Clarity. Purpose. "Then we'd better get to work," she said, For the next hour, Scarlett moved through the ballroom like she was conducting a symphony, making sure every note hit exactly right while her mind raced with questions she couldn't ask. What kind of threat? Who wanted to hurt Dominick? And why was she, a woman who'd known him less than a month, suddenly willing to fight for him? She was speaking with the mayor's wife when she noticed a disruption near the entrance. Raised voices, security guards converging. Caroline appeared at her elbow, her usually calm expression cracked with worry. "The journalist," Caroline said quietly. "He's making accusations, claiming he has proof of illegal activity, demanding access to restricted areas. Security's handling it, but everyone's watching," Scarlett finished. She could see heads turning, conversations pausing, the careful attention of people who smelled scandal. This was the threat Marcus had warned about. Not violence, but exposure. Public humiliation at an event meant to showcase Dominick's legitimacy and influence. Scarlett made a decision. She crossed the ballroom with purposeful strides, heels clicking against marble, her evening gown flowing behind her like armor. When she reached the commotion, she found a young man, couldn't be more than 25, surrounded by security guards, his phone held high like a weapon. "I have evidence," he was saying loudly, playing to the growing audience. "Evidence that Dominick Romano's business empire is built on illegal—" "Excuse me," Scarlett said, her voice cutting through his declaration with the kind of authority she'd learned from years of managing difficult donors. "I'm Scarlett Vaughn, the event director. Can I help you with something?" The journalist blinked, clearly thrown by her intervention. "I'm trying to expose the truth about your boss." "Mr. Romano isn't my boss, he's my client," Scarlett corrected. "And this is a private charity event to raise funds for children's cancer research. If you have concerns about Mr. Romano's business practices, I'm sure there are appropriate channels for those discussions. But disrupting an event that benefits sick children isn't journalism, it's cruelty." She pitched her voice to Carrie, making sure everyone could hear. Making sure the narrative shifted from scandal to sympathy. "You don't understand," the journalist started. "I understand that you're more interested in your career than in the children this event supports," Scarlett said. "I understand that real investigative journalism involves research and verification, not grandstanding at charity functions. And I understand that you're going to leave now, quietly, before you make an even bigger fool of yourself in front of some of the most influential people in the city." The journalist's face flushed red. But he was young and he was outnumbered, and Scarlett had just reframed his dramatic exposure as a selfish tantrum. Around them, guests were nodding, murmuring agreement. The tide had turned. Security escorted him out, and Scarlett turned back to the crowd with a warm smile. "My apologies for the interruption. Sometimes passion for a story overrides good judgment. Now, I believe we're about to hear from our keynote speaker about the incredible advances in pediatric cancer treatment your donations will support." She signaled to the program coordinator, and within seconds, the senator was at the podium, his voice booming through the sound system about hope and research and the power of collective generosity. Crisis averted. Scarlett slipped away from the crowd, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She found an empty alcove and leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. "That," said Dominick's voice from behind her, "was the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed." She turned to find him watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Something raw and unguarded, like he'd forgotten to maintain his usual control. "I thought Marcus told you to stay out of sight until the threat was handled," he said. "The threat was to your reputation, to this event. I wasn't going to let some kid with a camera ruin what we built." "What we built," Dominick repeated, stepping closer. "Not what you were paid to plan. What we built together." "Dominick." She didn't know what she was going to say. Warning? Permission? Surrender? She didn't get the chance to find out. He closed the remaining distance between them, one hand coming up to cup her face with devastating gentleness, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. "Tell me this is still just professional, and I'll step back. I'll honor the contract, the boundaries, everything we agreed to. But Scarlett, I need you to be the one who decides. I need you to have all the power here." She could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, could feel the heat of him, the solid strength of him, the barely leashed intensity of wanting something he was refusing to take without permission. And she realized, standing there in that alcove with the sound of the gala drifting through the walls, that Maya had been right. She wasn't the same woman who'd walked out of hotel room 412. That woman had been afraid of wanting, afraid of needing, afraid of giving someone power over her heart. This woman, the one who'd just faced down a room full of the city's elite to protect a man's reputation, who'd spent 2 weeks building something extraordinary, who'd remembered what it felt like to be passionate about work and life and possibility. This woman wasn't afraid anymore. "Don't stop," she whispered. Dominick's eyes darkened. His other hand found her waist, pulling her flesh against him, and then his mouth was on hers and the world narrowed to sensation. The taste of him, whiskey and mint. The heat of his body through expensive fabric, the careful way he kissed her like she was something precious that might break. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Scarlett felt like she'd crossed a threshold she couldn't uncross. "This is a terrible idea," she said. "The worst," Dominick agreed. "I just got out of a marriage. I'm probably rebounding. You're my client. There are so many reasons this shouldn't happen." "I can think of at least a dozen," Dominick said, "and I don't care about any of them." "You should. I should." "Probably." He rested his forehead against hers. "But I spent 2 weeks watching you transform this event into something extraordinary. Watching you handle every crisis with grace and intelligence. Watching you refuse to be intimidated by my world or my reputation. And I've never wanted anyone the way I want you." "Dominick, I know it's too soon," he said. "I know you need time. I know you have every reason not to trust me, not to trust this. So I'm going to make you a promise. I will never lie to you. I will never hide who I am or what I do. And I will wait as long as you need me to wait." Scarlett pulled back enough to look at him properly. "What if I don't want you to wait?" Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. "Then we figure out what comes next. Together." From the ballroom, she could hear applause, the keynote speech ending, the program moving into its final phase. Her event, the culmination of 2 weeks of relentless work, was reaching its climax. "I need to get back," she said reluctantly. "I know." Dominick straightened, his hands sliding away from her with obvious reluctance. "Finish your event. Make it perfect. Then we'll talk about what this means." Scarlett nodded, smoothing her dress, trying to look like a professional event director and not a woman who'd just been kissed senseless in an alcove. As she started to move past him, Dominick caught her hand. "Scarlett, thank you for defending me tonight, for seeing past the rumors and the reputation to something worth protecting." "You're welcome," she said softly. Then, because it needed to be said, "But Dominick, the rumors, the reputation, the things people say about your family business, I need to know if they're true." He held her gaze steadily. "Yes, they're true." The admission should have scared her, should have sent her running back to the safe, predictable life she'd built with Ethan, should have made her question every decision that had led her to this moment. Instead, standing there in the dim alcove with his hand still holding hers, Scarlett felt something click into place. She'd asked for truth. He'd given it to her without hesitation or excuse. That, she thought, was worth more than any pretty lie. "Okay," she said. "We'll talk about what that means later. Right now, I have a gala to finish." She walked back into the ballroom with her head high and her heart racing, stepping into the spotlight as the senator finished his speech and the crowd turned their attention to the evening's final moments. The event ended in triumph, donors writing larger checks than projected, guests lingering to praise the execution. The senator himself seeking Scarlett out to offer his personal congratulations. As the last guests departed and the cleanup crew began their work, Scarlett stood in the empty ballroom feeling the exhaustion finally catch up with her. She'd done it. She'd created something extraordinary, handled a crisis with grace, and maybe, just maybe, opened herself to something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "Ready to go home?" Maya asked, appearing with Scarlett's wrap and purse. "You've been on your feet for 16 hours. Actually," Scarlett said, looking across the ballroom to where Dominick stood talking with Marcus, his eyes finding hers like he'd known exactly where she was all along. "I think I have one more conversation to have first." Maya followed her gaze and smiled knowingly. "Be careful, Scar, but also, be brave. You deserve someone who sees you the way he does." Scarlett hugged her friend, grateful for the permission she hadn't realized she needed. Then she crossed the empty ballroom toward Dominick, toward uncertainty, toward possibility, toward a future she was finally ready to claim on her own terms. Marcus excused himself with a knowing look that suggested he'd been aware of everything happening in that alcove, leaving Scarlett and Dominick alone in the vast ballroom that suddenly felt intimate despite its size. The cleanup crew worked at the far end, their movements creating a distant soundtrack of clinking glass and quiet efficiency. "Walk with me," Dominick said, offering his arm with old-fashioned courtesy that somehow suited him perfectly. They took the private elevator to the rooftop terrace where they'd talked days ago, though it felt like a lifetime had passed since then. The city stretched below them, a glittering sprawl of possibility and danger, beautiful and merciless in the darkness. "That journalist," Scarlett said, breaking the silence. "What was he going to expose?" Dominick leaned against the railing, his profile sharp against the city lights. "My family's connections to organized crime, which isn't exactly a secret to anyone who pays attention, but having it shouted at a charity gala would have been problematic." "Problematic how?" "Several of tonight's donors are politicians who can't be seen associating with anyone too obviously connected to illegal activity," Dominick explained. "They know what my family is. They accept the generous donations to their campaigns and causes, but they need plausible deniability. That journalist was trying to eliminate that deniability. Scarlett processed this careful dance of knowledge and pretense. So you live in this gray area, dangerous enough to be effective, legitimate enough to be acceptable. That's exactly what I do, Dominick said. My grandfather built the family business on violence and fear. My father expanded it with strategic brutality. I'm transforming it into something that can survive in daylight. Hotels, restaurants, legitimate real estate. But that transformation takes time, and it requires maintaining the old connections while building new ones. And tonight's gala was part of that transformation. Tonight's gala was critical to that transformation, Dominick corrected. Those donors represent access to political influence, social legitimacy, business opportunities that my family name alone can't secure. You didn't just plan an event, Scarlett. You built me a bridge between two worlds. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders. She'd known the event was important, but understanding it as a strategic piece in Dominick's larger chess game added new dimensions. What happens to the journalist? She asked. Nothing, Dominick said, and when she looked at him skeptically, he smiled slightly. I mean it. He's a kid with ambition and bad judgment. Marcus will have a conversation with his editor about fact-checking standards and legal liability. The story will die quietly. No one gets hurt. You could hurt him if you wanted to. I could, Dominick agreed. But that's old-world thinking. Violence creates enemies and attracts attention. Letting him fail on his own creates a cautionary tale about the consequences of sloppy journalism. Much more effective. Scarlett shivered, though whether from the night air or the casual way Dominick discussed power and consequence, she couldn't say. He noticed immediately, shrugging out of his tuxedo jacket and draping it over her shoulders. It carried his warmth and that expensive cologne, and she had to resist the urge to pull it tighter around herself. You're afraid of me now, he observed quietly. Not afraid, Scarlett said carefully, but aware. There's a difference. What are you aware of? She looked at him directly. That you're dangerous. That your world operates by rules I don't fully understand. That getting involved with you means accepting risks I can't entirely predict. And yet you kissed me back. Yes. Why? Scarlett considered lying, deflecting, protecting herself with the careful evasions she'd mastered during her marriage. But Dominick had promised honesty, and she found herself wanting to match it. Because I'm tired of living a half-life, she said. I spent 5 years being safe, being appropriate, being exactly who I was supposed to be. And it was killing me slowly. So quietly, I didn't even notice until I found Ethan with another woman and realized I felt relieved instead of devastated. You think I'm the opposite of safe, Dominick said. I think you're real, Scarlett corrected. You don't pretend to be anything other than what you are. You don't hide behind acceptable facades or comfortable lies. And being around you makes me feel real too. Like I don't have to perform or pretend or carefully manage every word and gesture. Dominick moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. I need you to understand something, Scarlett. My world isn't just dangerous in abstract ways. There are people who would hurt you to hurt me. There are consequences to being seen at my side that go beyond gossip and social judgment. But are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to make sure you know what you're choosing. His hand came up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly gentle. Because once you're in my life, really in it, not just as an event planner I hired, I will protect you with everything I have. But that protection comes with its own costs. Loss of privacy, constant security, people making assumptions about who you are and what you want. You're describing your life, Scarlett said, the costs you already pay. Yes, and you're asking if I'm willing to pay them too. I'm asking if you understand what you'd be signing up for. Dominick's eyes searched hers. I'm asking if the woman who just ended one complicated relationship is ready for something exponentially more complicated. Scarlett thought about the question seriously, refusing to let attraction override judgment. She thought about her empty apartment waiting for divorce papers to finalize, about the charity work she loved that might become controversial if she was associated with Dominick publicly, about her friends, her family, the carefully constructed life she'd built that had turned out to be so fragile. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know if I'm ready for all of that, but I know I don't want to walk away without finding out. Something shifted in Dominick's expression, relief maybe, or gratitude. Then we take it slow. We figure it out as we go, and the moment it becomes too much, the moment you want out, you tell me and I let you go. No pressure, no manipulation, no making you feel trapped. You'd really let me go? Scarlett asked skeptically. Just like that? I don't own you, Scarlett. I don't want to own you. His thumb traced her jawline. I want you to choose me, every day, freely, Because that's the only way this means anything. It was, she thought, possibly the most seductive thing anyone had ever said to her. Not promises of forever, or declarations of obsessive love, but the simple acknowledgement that her autonomy mattered more than his desire. "Take me home," she said softly. "Not to your home. To mine. I need to think. And I can't do that when you're looking at me like that." Dominick's mouth curved. "Like what?" "Like you're planning all the ways you want to touch me," Scarlett said bluntly. "I am," he admitted without shame. "But you're right. You should think. You should be sure." He pulled out his phone. "Marcus will drive you. I'll have someone deliver your car tomorrow." "I can drive myself, Scarlett," his voice went serious. "That journalist might have been dealt with, but word will spread that someone tried to expose me tonight. For the next few days, anyone associated with me becomes a potential target for my enemies to send messages. Please, let Marcus make sure you get home safely." The request, and it was a request, not a demand, reminded her again of the reality she was considering entering. A world where driving yourself home at night became a security concern, where being associated with the wrong person made you a target. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt oddly calm, like she'd finally stopped fighting against the current and decided to see where it would take her. "Okay," she agreed. "But Dominick, tomorrow, I want you to tell me everything. Not vague references to family business and old connections. Real details about who you are and what you do. I can't make an informed choice without complete information." "Tomorrow," he promised. "I'll tell you everything you want to know." Marcus appeared as if summoned, keys already in hand. As Scarlett followed him to the elevator, she looked back once to find Dominick still watching her, his jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, his expression unreadable but intense. The last thing she saw before the elevator doors closed was him raising his hand in a small wave, a gesture so normal, so human, that it made her chest ache with the contrast between the man and the mythology. The drive home was quiet, Marcus respecting her need for silence. When they pulled up outside her apartment building, he walked her to the door despite her protests. "Ms. Vaughn," he said as she unlocked the entrance. "For what it's worth, I've worked for Mr. Romano for 8 years. I've seen him with a lot of women. He's never looked at any of them the way he looks at you." "Is that supposed to be reassuring?" Scarlett asked. "It's supposed to be information," Marcus said. "What you do with it is up to you. But I thought you should know. You matter to him. Really matter. And that makes you important to all of us who care about keeping him safe and sane." He left before she could respond, sliding back into the black SUV and disappearing into the night. Scarlett rode the elevator to her third-floor apartment, let herself into the space that had never quite felt like home, even after 2 years of living there. It was too perfect, too carefully decorated, too much a reflection of the life she'd thought she wanted rather than the life she actually had. She dropped her purse on the counter, kicked off her heels, and only then realized she was still wearing Dominick's jacket. She should have given it back. Should have returned it before leaving the hotel. Instead, she pulled it tighter and breathed in the scent of him, allowing herself this one small intimacy while she tried to make sense of the chaos her life had become. 3 weeks ago, she'd been married to a man she'd stopped loving. Now she was considering a relationship with a man who'd openly admitted his family was connected to organized crime. A man who'd kissed her like she was oxygen and promised to let her go if she asked. Her phone buzzed. Maya, checking in. "Did you survive?" Scarlett smiled and typed back. "Event was perfect. Everything else is complicated." "Good complicated or bad complicated?" "I have no idea. That's the most honest thing you've said in years. Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." But sleep felt impossible with her mind racing through everything Dominick had said, everything he'd implied, everything she still needed to understand before making any decisions. She made chamomile tea and curled up on her couch, pulling out her laptop. If she was going to seriously consider this, she needed more information than rumors and warnings. She started searching. Dominick Romano, Romano family, West Coast organized crime. The articles painted a picture that was simultaneously clear and murky. The Romano family had deep roots in traditional organized crime. Gambling, protection, labor racketeering. Dominick's grandfather, Salvatore, had been legendary for his brutality. His father, Marco, had expanded the empire while maintaining iron control through violence and fear. But Dominick himself was different. He'd gone to Yale for business school. He'd systematically bought legitimate businesses and transformed them into profitable enterprises. He donated to charities, cultivated political connections, built a public persona as a successful entrepreneur with a complicated family history. The FBI had investigated him multiple times, never charged him with anything. Some articles suggested he was too smart to get caught. Others suggested he was genuinely trying to go legitimate while managing family obligations he couldn't entirely escape. One profile from a business magazine described him as the most dangerous kind of criminal, one smart enough to make crime look like commerce. Another, from a more sympathetic journalist, called him a man trying to build something new from a foundation built on blood, walking a tightrope between two worlds that both claim him. Scarlett read until her eyes burned and her tea went cold. Then she read more, chasing threads through family connections, business acquisitions, charity donations that might have been money laundering or might have been genuine philanthropy. By 3 a.m., she understood one thing clearly. Dominick Romano existed in shades of gray that would never resolve into simple black and white. He was dangerous and disciplined, violent and visionary, criminal and legitimate all at once. And she wanted him anyway. That realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like acceptance. Like finally being honest with herself about who she was and what she actually wanted, instead of what she thought she should want. She fell asleep on the couch, still wearing his jacket, her laptop open to an article about the Romano family's transformation from street gang to business empire, her mind finally quiet after hours of analysis. When her phone rang at 8 a.m., she was disoriented, stiff from sleeping awkwardly, and completely unprepared for the voice on the other end. "Scarlett, it's Ethan. We need to talk." She sat up too quickly, her neck protesting. "Ethan? How did you get this number?" "It's still your number," he said, confused. "You just haven't been answering my calls." "That's because I told my lawyer to handle all communication," Scarlett said, her mind still foggy with sleep and research. "What do you want?" "I want to talk about the divorce." He sounded tentative, uncertain, nothing like the confident attorney she'd married. "I want to ask if we can slow down. Maybe try counseling before we make any final decisions." Scarlett laughed, the sound sharp even to her own ears. "You're joking." "I'm not. Scarlett, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But 5 years of marriage should count for something. We should at least try to fix this before throwing it all away." "You threw it away when you slept with Rebecca," Scarlett said flatly. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." "Please." Now he sounded desperate. "Just meet me for coffee. One conversation. If you still want the divorce after, I won't fight it. But give me a chance to explain." She should have said no. Should have hung up and let her lawyer continue handling everything. But some part of her, the part that still remembered loving him or thinking she loved him, felt like she owed him this final conversation. "Fine," she said. "Coffee. Today, noon, the place near the courthouse. 1 hour, Ethan. That's all you get." She hung up before he could thank her, before she could change her mind. Then she looked at the time and realized she had 4 hours before that meeting and a promise from Dominick to hear the complete truth about his life. She showered, changed into jeans and a cashmere sweater, casual armor for difficult conversations, and called the number Dominick had programmed into her phone the night before. He answered on the first ring. "Scarlett, how did you sleep?" "Barely. I spent half the night researching your family history." A pause. Then carefully, "And what did you learn?" "That you're either a criminal masquerading as a businessman or a businessman struggling with a criminal legacy, depending on who's writing the article," Scarlett said. "I'd like to hear your version." "Come to my office," Dominick said. "I'll tell you everything." "I have a meeting at noon with my ex-husband. Can we do it after?" Another pause, longer this time. "He wants to reconcile." "He wants to talk," Scarlett corrected. "I want closure. There's a difference." "Scarlett," Dominick's voice went soft, dangerous. "If he hurts you." "He won't," she interrupted. "It's coffee in public. I'll be fine. But Dominick, I need you to trust that I can handle my own life, even the messy parts." "I do trust that," he said after a moment. "But I don't trust him. Text me when you're done. Please." The please got her, the way it always did when powerful men remembered to ask instead of demand. "I will," she promised. The coffee shop near the courthouse was neutral territory, chosen deliberately for its public visibility and lack of romantic ambiance. Scarlett arrived early, ordered a latte, and claimed a table near the window where she could watch Ethan approach. He looked terrible, rumpled suit, dark circles under his eyes, hair that needed cutting. She felt a pang of something that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't entirely satisfaction either. "Thank you for coming," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. He'd brought flowers, grocery store roses that looked apologetic and desperate. "I don't want those," Scarlett said, not unkindly. "Say what you came to say, Ethan." He set the flowers aside, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I've been a fool, a complete fool. Rebecca meant nothing. She was just, I don't know, available, interested, easy." "This isn't making your case," Scarlett observed. "I'm trying to explain that it wasn't about you. It was about me feeling invisible in our marriage. You were always so busy with your charity work, your events, your perfect social calendar. I felt like an accessory in your life instead of a partner." Scarlett sipped her latte and considered this attempted shifting of blame. A month ago, it might have worked. She might have felt guilty, might have questioned whether she'd contributed to his infidelity through her own failures. Now, she just felt tired. "You're right," she said. "I did make you feel invisible, because I was too busy being invisible to myself to notice what was happening to us." Ethan blinked. "What?" "Our marriage was a performance, Ethan. We both knew it. We just didn't admit it. You played the successful attorney with the perfect wife. I played the perfect wife with the successful husband. And somewhere in all that playing, we forgot to actually connect as real people. But we can fix that," Ethan said urgently. "We can go to counseling, learn to communicate better, rebuild what we had." "We can't rebuild what we never actually had," Scarlett interrupted gently. "Ethan, be honest. When was the last time you looked at me and felt genuine desire? Not obligation, not habit, but actual want." He opened his mouth, closed it. His silence was answer enough. "Exactly," Scarlett said. "And when was the last time I looked at you that way? We became roommates who shared a last name. Maybe that's fixable for some people, but I don't want to fix it. I want something real." "And you think you'll find that with Dominick Romano?" Ethan's voice turned sharp, accusatory. Scarlett's spine straightened. "How do you know about Dominick?" "There are pictures, Scarlett. You dancing with him at that gala, looking at him like—" He stopped, his jaw tight. "Do you have any idea who he is? What his family does?" "I know exactly who he is," Scarlett said evenly. "And that's none of your business. It's absolutely my business if my wife is getting involved with a criminal." "Ex-wife soon," Scarlett corrected. "And you don't get to have opinions about my life anymore, Ethan. You gave up that right in hotel room 412. "I'm trying to protect you," he insisted. "Romano is dangerous. His family is connected to organized crime. You'll get hurt." "Maybe," Scarlett agreed, "but that's my choice to make, just like sleeping with Rebecca was your choice. We all get to make our own mistakes." Ethan's face flushed red. "This is insane. You're throwing away our marriage for some fantasy about a man who will never actually care about you. You're just a conquest to him, Scarlett, another pretty thing to add to his collection." The words were designed to wound, to make her doubt, to pull her back into the safe cage of her old life. A month ago, they might have worked. Now she just stood up and gathered her purse. "I'm done here," she said. "My lawyer will be in touch about finalizing the divorce. Sign the papers, Ethan. Move on with your life. I already have." She walked out of the coffee shop with her head high, leaving the grocery store roses on the table like the cheap gesture they were. Her hands were shaking with adrenaline, but underneath the trembling was something solid and sure. She'd faced down her past and walked away from it freely. Whatever came next, at least it would be her choice. She texted Dominick from her car. "Done. Where's your office?" His response came immediately, an address in the financial district followed by, "Top floor, Marcus is waiting in the lobby." The building was sleek glass and steel, housing law firms and investment companies and the kind of businesses that required appointments and security clearances. Marcus was indeed waiting, looking less intimidating in a dark suit than he had in tactical gear at the gala. "Miss Vaughn," he greeted her. "How was your meeting?" "Illuminating," Scarlett said. "How's your morning?" "Quiet. The way I like it." He guided her to a private elevator that required a key card. "Boss is expecting you. Take all the time you need." The top floor was Dominick's domain. All clean lines and expensive furniture, artwork that probably cost more than Scarlett's car, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. His assistant, an efficient-looking woman in her 50s, smiled warmly and directed Scarlett to the corner office. Dominick stood at those inevitable windows, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He turned when she entered, his expression softening in a way that made her chest tight. "Ti richiamo," he said into the phone, then ended the call. "Your ex-husband. How did it go?" "He wants to reconcile. I told him no." Scarlett set her purse down. "He also warned me about you, called you dangerous, suggested I was just a conquest." Dominick's expression went cold. "And what did you say?" "That it was none of his business." She met his gaze directly. "But he raised a valid question, Dominick. Am I just a conquest, another pretty thing for your collection?" "Come here," Dominick said quietly. Scarlett crossed the office until she stood in front of him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the tension radiating from him. "I have had relationships," he said bluntly. "Some brief, some longer. All of them ended because the women wanted either the fantasy of danger or the reality of legitimacy, and I couldn't give them both. I'm not a fantasy, Scarlett. I'm a man trying to build something better from a foundation built on violence. And I'm not entirely legitimate. I never will be, not with my family history. Any woman with me has to accept that contradiction." "And you think I can accept it?" "I think you understand it," Dominick said, "because you're trying to build something better from your own wreckage. You're trying to figure out who you are outside of a marriage that defined you. We're both in transition, both trying to become something new while carrying the weight of what we were. His hand came up to cup her face. You're not a conquest. You're not a fantasy. You're a woman I respect and desire in equal measure, which terrifies me because respect makes me careful and desire makes me reckless. Scarlett leaned into his touch. You promised to tell me everything. The real details, not just philosophical statements about contradictions and transitions. I did. Dominick stepped back, gestured to the leather couch. Sit. This will take a while. They sat, and Dominick began to talk. He told her about growing up as the grandson of a Mafia boss, learning to navigate violence as casually as other children learn to ride bikes, about watching his father break men's bones over unpaid debts while preaching family loyalty at Sunday dinners, about being sent to Yale not despite his family's criminal connections but because of them, to learn the business skills that would help modernize their empire. He told her about the first time he'd killed a man, an attempted hit on his father that he'd intercepted at 19, the gun heavy in his hand, the weight of that choice still sitting in his chest, about realizing that violence was easy, almost addictive, and that scared him more than any external threat. I could have been like my father, Dominick said quietly. Could have ruled through fear and brutality and raw power. Part of me wanted to. But I looked at our empire and saw an expiration date. The FBI gets smarter, technology makes anonymity harder, legitimate business offers better returns with less risk. So I started transitioning, buying hotels, restaurants, real estate, legitimate income streams that could sustain the family without traditional criminal activity. But you haven't fully transitioned, Scarlett said. No, because I can't entirely abandon the old connections without creating a power vacuum that would lead to violence. So I maintain relationships with people who engage in illegal activity. I provide resources when asked. I benefit from the protection that comes from being a Romano. But I don't directly engage anymore. I don't order hits. I don't run drugs. I don't operate protection rackets. You just profit from the people who do. Yes, Dominick admitted, which makes me complicit even if I'm not active. I know that. I accept it. And I'm working toward a future where my family name means business success instead of criminal enterprise. But that future is years away, maybe decades. In the meantime, I live in the gray area between two worlds. Scarlett processed this carefully. And if you're with me, I live there too. Yes, you'd be associated with my reputation, my family, my history. People would make assumptions. You'd face judgment, and there would be security concerns, not constant danger, but the need for precautions. The understanding that my enemies might see you as leverage. You're really trying to talk me out of this, Scarlett observed. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're choosing. Dominick took her hand. Because once you make this choice, Scarlett, I won't let you go easily. I'll honor my promise to respect your autonomy, but I'll also fight like hell to make you want to stay. And I need you to know that before you decide. She looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of his olive skin against her paler complexion, at the strength in his fingers that had held guns and pens with equal competence. I'm not sure I'm ready for a relationship, she said honestly. My divorce isn't finalized. I'm still figuring out who I am outside of being Ethan's wife. I might need time. Then we take time, Dominick said simply. And you're okay with that? With uncertainty and waiting and not knowing where this goes? Scarlett. He lifted her hand to his mouth, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. I've spent 10 years transforming a criminal empire into legitimate business while managing family obligations that could get me killed or imprisoned. I'm intimately familiar with uncertainty. What I'm not familiar with is wanting someone enough to be patient. But for you, I'll learn. It was too much and not enough all at once. Too much intensity, too much honesty, too much raw emotion from a man who ruled an empire with calculated precision. Not enough time, not enough certainty, not enough distance from the wreckage of her marriage. But sitting there in his office with the city spread below them, Scarlett realized something important. She didn't need perfect timing or complete certainty. She just needed to be brave enough to choose what she actually wanted instead of what felt safe. Okay, she said. Let's try this. Slowly, with honesty and patience and the understanding that I might get scared and need space. Dominick's smile was worth every risk. Slowly, he agreed, starting with dinner. Tonight. Not at one of my restaurants where everyone watches. Somewhere quiet, where we can just talk. I'd like that, Scarlett said. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of restrained want, and Scarlett felt something in her chest unlock. A door she'd kept closed for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to open it. When they finally pulled apart, Dominick rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, he said quietly, for being brave enough to try. Thank you for being honest enough to deserve it, Scarlett replied. She left his office with a dinner date planned and a future that terrified and excited her in equal measure, stepping into uncertainty with her eyes wide open and her heart finally willing to risk the fall. To find him already seated at a corner table, the warm lighting casting shadows across his face that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. "You're early," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "I didn't want you walking in alone," Dominick admitted. Old habits. The waiter appeared with wine, a bottle Dominick had apparently already selected, and menus that featured handwritten descriptions of dishes Scarlett couldn't pronounce. She realized with a small jolt that this was their first real date, if you could call it that. Everything else had been business meetings and stolen moments and conversations weighted with consequences. "Tell me something normal," she said suddenly. "Something that has nothing to do with family business or charity galas or dangerous reputations." Dominick's mouth curved. "Define normal." "I don't know. Favorite movie? Embarrassing childhood story? What you do when you can't sleep?" She took a sip of wine. "Something that makes you human instead of mythological." He considered this, his fingers tracing the stem of his wine glass. "When I can't sleep, I cook. Usually Italian dishes my grandmother taught me before she died. Ossobuco, homemade pasta, things that require focus and time. My kitchen at home is better equipped than most restaurants." The image of Dominick Romano in a kitchen, sleeves rolled up, focused on something as ordinary as cooking, made Scarlett smile. "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Violent exercise, reviewing security footage, making ominous phone calls about business problems." "I do all of those things too," Dominick said with dry humor. "But cooking is meditation. It's one of the few activities where I can shut my brain off and just focus on the present moment. Plus, my grandmother was terrifying. She'd haunt me if I wasted the skills she spent years teaching." "Tell me about her," Scarlett said, genuinely curious. Dominick's expression softened. Maria Romano was 4 feet 11 inches of pure determination wrapped in a floral apron. She emigrated from Sicily at 19 with nothing but a suitcase and her mother's recipes. She married my grandfather, knowing exactly what he was, a violent man building a violent empire, and decided that if she couldn't change his business, she'd at least civilize his home. "Did it work?" "Salvatore Romano never raised his voice at family dinner," Dominick said. "Never conducted business in her kitchen. Never brought violence across her threshold. In a life defined by brutality, he created one sacred space where none of it could touch. Because she demanded it, and he loved her enough to give her that." The story revealed layers Scarlett hadn't expected. "You admired him." "I admired what he was willing to do for her," Dominick corrected. "The rest of him, the violence, the cruelty, the empire built on fear? That I understood as necessary for survival in his world. But I never admired it. I just learned from it." Their food arrived. Small plates designed for sharing, each one a work of art. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easier than Scarlett had anticipated. Dominick asked about her childhood in Sacramento, her college years studying communications, the moment she'd decided to focus on charity work instead of corporate event planning. "I like the feeling of building something that mattered," Scarlett explained. "Corporate events were just marketing dressed up as celebration. But charity work, raising money for children's hospitals, conservation efforts, research funding, that felt real. Like I was contributing to something beyond profit margins and brand awareness." "Is that why you accepted my offer?" Dominick asked. "Because the gala supported real causes?" "Partly," Scarlett admitted. "But mostly I accepted because I needed to prove to myself that Ethan's betrayal hadn't diminished my capabilities. That I could still do excellent work even while my personal life was falling apart." "And did you prove it?" "Yes." She met his eyes. "And then I proved something else. That I could handle pressure and crisis and public scrutiny without falling apart. That maybe I'm stronger than I thought I was." Dominick reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You were always that strong, Scarlett. You just needed circumstances that required you to access it." The touch sent warmth up her arm, settling in her chest. This was dangerous territory again, the pull between them that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with chemistry and recognition and the terrifying possibility of genuine connection. "Tell me about your worst fear," she said, needing to ground herself in honesty before she got swept away by attraction. Dominick didn't hesitate. "That I'll become my father. That despite all my efforts to build something better, I'll end up ruling through fear and violence because that's all I really know. That the legitimate businessman is just a costume I'm wearing over the criminal I was raised to be." The raw honesty of it stole her breath. "Do you think that's true?" "Some days," he admitted, "when I have to make hard decisions about family obligations. When someone tests my authority and I have to respond in ways that prove I'm still dangerous. When I look in the mirror and see my father's eyes looking back at me." "What do you see when you look at me?" Scarlett asked quietly. Dominick's thumb traced circles on her palm. Someone brave enough to walk away from safety and security when they became a cage. Someone who faces fear with grace and handles crisis with intelligence. Someone who makes me want to be better than what I was raised to be. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I'm not asking you to save me, Dominick said. I'm just telling you what I see, what you inspire without trying. The waiter appeared to clear their plates, breaking the intensity of the moment. Scarlett excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment to collect herself, to remember how to breathe normally. The bathroom was empty, all marble and soft lighting. She stared at her reflection, flushed cheeks, bright eyes, the look of a woman teetering on the edge of something that would change everything. Maya would tell her to be careful. Her lawyer would tell her to run. Every rational voice in her head was screaming that getting involved with Dominick Romano was the definition of terrible judgment. But standing there in that beautiful bathroom, Scarlett realized she was tired of listening to rational voices, tired of playing it safe, tired of being the perfect, appropriate version of herself that everyone expected. She wanted messy. She wanted real. She wanted the terrifying freefall of genuine feeling. She returned to the table to find Dominick on his phone, his expression tense. He ended the call when he saw her, but the easy warmth from earlier had been replaced by something harder. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Business problem," he said shortly. "Nothing for you to worry about." "Don't do that." Scarlett sat down, her voice firm. "Don't shut me out and tell me not to worry. If we're going to try this, you have to actually let me in." Dominick studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "One of my father's old associates is making noise about territory disputes. He thinks because I've gone legitimate, I'm weak. He's testing boundaries, seeing if I'll respond the old way, or if I've actually gone soft." "What's the old way?" "Violence. Public displays of dominance. Making examples out of anyone who challenges my authority." "And the new way?" "Negotiation. Finding compromise that lets both parties save face. Using legitimate business leverage instead of physical intimidation." Dominick's jaw tightened. "The problem is that the new way looks like weakness to people raised in the old world, which encourages more challenges, more tests." "So you're stuck," Scarlett said. "Respond the old way and you prove you haven't really changed. Respond the new way and you invite more challenges." "Exactly." He looked at her with something like surprise. "Most people don't understand that dilemma. Most people haven't spent 5 years navigating the politics of charity boards where every decision gets judged for hidden motives and long-term implications," Scarlett said dryly. "Different contexts, same basic problem. How do you maintain authority while transforming the system that gave you that authority in the first place? And how did you handle it?" Scarlett thought back to the countless board meetings, the careful negotiations between old guard donors and young activists, the delicate balance of honoring tradition while pushing for change. "I found third options. Ways to acknowledge the old guard's concerns while still moving forward with new approaches. I made them feel heard and valued even when I was fundamentally changing how things operated. That only works if both parties are operating in good faith," Dominick pointed out. "True, but it works more often than you'd think. People challenge authority when they feel disrespected or invisible. If you can address those underlying feelings while still maintaining your boundaries, you diffuse most conflicts before they escalate." Dominick was quiet, his expression thoughtful. "You're suggesting I meet with Carmine, actually sit down and hear what he's concerned about, instead of just shutting him down." "I'm suggesting that maybe this isn't about territory at all. Maybe it's about a man who spent decades operating one way, watching the world change and feeling left behind. Maybe if you acknowledge that fear, instead of just responding to the challenge, you find a different resolution. Or maybe I show weakness and get a knife in my back," Dominick said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "Or maybe you show strength," Scarlett countered. "Real strength. The kind that doesn't need violence to prove itself." He reached for her hand again, this time with something like wonder in his expression. "You're extraordinary, you know that?" "I'm practical," Scarlett corrected. "And I've learned that most conflicts are actually about emotions and ego, not actual substantive disagreements. If you can address the emotions, the substantive stuff usually resolves itself. Will you come with me?" The question came out before Dominick seemed to fully think it through. "To the meeting with Carmine, not as a participant, but as, I don't know, a witness. A reminder to myself that there are other ways to handle this." Every instinct screamed that this was a terrible idea. She'd been in Dominick's life for less than a month. She had no business involving herself in family disputes with dangerous men. She should say no, maintain boundaries, protect herself from getting pulled deeper into his world. "When?" she heard herself ask instead. "Tomorrow night, neutral location, public enough to be safe. Just a conversation." "What exactly would my role be?" "To sit there and exist," Dominick said simply. "To remind me that I'm trying to build something better. That I don't have to default to my father's solutions. It was too much to ask, and somehow exactly the right thing to ask. Because Scarlett understood, better than most people could, what it meant to fight against the patterns you were raised with, to try to become something new while the weight of the old kept pulling you back. Okay, she said, I'll come. But Dominick, if it gets dangerous, it won't, he promised. Marcus will be there. Multiple security measures. And if Carmine tries anything, we leave immediately. Your safety isn't negotiable. They finished dinner with the understanding that they'd crossed another threshold, moved from tentative dating into something more complicated and more real. When Dominick walked her to her car, Marcus trailing at a discreet distance, he pulled her close, his hand tangling in her hair. Thank you, he said quietly, for trusting me with this, for offering perspective I didn't know I needed. Thank you for asking for it, Scarlett replied, for letting me see the parts of your life you could easily hide. He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of want barely held in check. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Scarlett felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, with the wind pushing her forward. I should go, she said, even though going was the last thing she wanted. You should, Dominick agreed, but his hand stayed on her waist, warm and solid and possessive in a way that should have bothered her but just made her feel claimed. Tomorrow night, she said. Text me the details. Tomorrow night, he confirmed. Scarlett drove home with her heart racing and her mind spinning through everything that could go wrong, meeting with one of Dominick's father's old associates, inserting herself into family business, becoming visible in his world in a way that couldn't be taken back. But underneath the anxiety was something else. Excitement. Purpose. The feeling that maybe, finally, she was living instead of just performing life. Maya called as she was getting ready for bed. I haven't heard from you in 2 days. Should I be worried or happy? Both, Scarlett said, curling up on her couch. Definitely both. Tell me everything. So Scarlett did. The dinner, the conversation, the vulnerability Dominick had shown, the meeting she'd agreed to attend. When she finished, Maya was quiet for a long moment. You're in love with him, Maya said finally. I barely know him. You know the parts that matter, and you're falling, Scar, hard and fast. Scarlett closed her eyes. Is that a bad thing? It's a terrifying thing, Maya said gently. But also maybe a beautiful thing. Just promise me you'll be careful. Not just physically careful, but heart careful. Men like Dominick, they consume everything. Make sure you don't lose yourself in the process of being with him. I won't, Scarlett promised, though she wasn't entirely sure it was a promise she could keep. The next day passed in a blur of normalcy that felt surreal given what the evening held. Scarlett met with her lawyer to review divorce documents. Ethan had signed everything without contest, probably still hoping she'd change her mind. She had coffee with former colleagues from the Children's Hospital Foundation Board, fielding questions about the gala and deflecting curiosity about her connection to Dominick. You looked radiant in those photos, Margaret Chen, the board president, observed. Dancing with Dominick Romano. That's quite a coup for a first major event. Mr. Romano was a generous host, Scarlett said carefully. He was also clearly quite taken with you. Margaret's smile was knowing. I've seen Dominick Romano at dozens of events over the years. He's always polite, always appropriate, always maintains perfect distance. The way he looked at you in those photos? That was different. Scarlett felt heat rise to her cheeks. We're seeing each other, casually. Nothing about Dominick Romano is casual, Margaret said, but her tone was kind. Just be careful, dear. His world isn't always forgiving to outsiders. The warning echoed Maya's, echoed her own internal cautions. But Scarlett was past the point of careful. She was committed now, for better or worse. Dominick picked her up at 7, Marcus driving while they sat in the back seat of the SUV. He'd dressed down, dark jeans, black button-down, leather jacket that somehow made him look more dangerous than his suits did. You didn't have to do this, he said, taking her hand. I could still have Marcus take you home. I want to be here, Scarlett said, and meant it. The meeting location was a family-owned Italian restaurant in a neighborhood that probably looked charming in daylight, but felt vaguely ominous in the dark. Marcus parked where he had clear sight lines to the entrance, and 2 other security personnel, Scarlett recognized them from the gala, positioned themselves at strategic points. Carmine will have his own people, Dominick explained as they walked to the entrance. This kind of meeting, everyone brings insurance. As long as everyone stays calm, it's just theater. The restaurant's owner greeted Dominick with the kind of deference that suggested long history. He led them to a private room in the back where a man in his 60s sat alone at a table set for 4. Carmine DeLuca looked like Central Casting's version of an old-school mobster, silver hair slicked back, expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the thickness of violence in his build, eyes that had seen and done things that left marks. He stood when they entered, his gaze sweeping over Scarlett with undisguised curiosity. "Dominick," he said, his accent thick with the old neighborhood. "You bring a date to business meeting?" "Scarlett Vaughn," Dominick said, his hand on her lower back. "Scarlett, this is Carmine DeLuca. He worked with my father for 30 years. Scarlett extended her hand, refusing to be intimidated. "Mr. DeLuca." Carmine's handshake was firm, assessing. "Pretty girl. Too pretty for this ugly business." "Then maybe we should make the business less ugly," Scarlett said evenly. Something flickered in Carmine's expression. Surprise, maybe, or reluctant respect. He gestured to the chairs. "Sit. We talk." They sat, and a waiter appeared with wine and antipasto that no one touched. Dominick leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed confidence that Scarlett was learning to recognize as his most dangerous pose. "You wanted to meet, Carmine. Here I am." "Oh, you're killing our business," Carmine said bluntly. "All this legitimate shit, the hotels, the restaurants, the clean money. You forget where you come from. You forget who built the empire you're spending." "I haven't forgotten anything," Dominick said quietly. "I'm building on the foundation my grandfather and father created, making it sustainable for the next generation." Sustainable. Carmine spat the word like a curse. "Your father understood power. Real power. Not this corporate bullshit." "My father's dead," Dominick said flatly. "Heart attack at 57 from stress and paranoia. Is that the legacy you want? That I should want?" "I want respect," Carmine shot back. "I want to not be cut out of decisions by some punk who thinks he's smarter than everyone who came before." There it was. The real issue. Not territory or business practices, but respect and relevance. Scarlett caught Dominick's eye, gave him a small nod of encouragement. Dominick's posture shifted slightly. "You're right. I should have consulted you before making changes that affected your operations. That was disrespectful, and I apologize." Carmine blinked, clearly not expecting an apology. "You what?" "You gave 30 years of your life to building my family's empire," Dominick said. "You were loyal to my father even when that loyalty cost you. You deserve better than being shut out of decisions without explanation." "So you're saying I was right to be pissed?" "I'm saying your anger is justified," Dominick corrected. "But the way you've been expressing it, undermining my authority, making territorial plays, encouraging younger associates to test my boundaries, that's creating problems for both of us." Carmine's jaw tightened. "You going to threaten me now? Remind me who's boss?" "No," Dominick said simply. "I'm going to offer you a choice. You can keep fighting me, keep trying to prove that the old ways are better. Eventually one of us wins and one of us loses, and either outcome damages the family business we both care about. Or we can figure out how to work together, how to transition to legitimate operations while respecting the experience and knowledge you bring." "What does that look like?" Carmine asked suspiciously. "It looks like consulting you on major decisions before I make them. It looks like finding roles in the legitimate businesses for people with your expertise. It looks like building something new together instead of choosing between old and new." Scarlett watched the older man's face as he processed this offer, saw the pride warring with pragmatism, the desire to maintain dignity, fighting with the recognition that Dominick was offering an honorable exit from a conflict neither of them could win cleanly. "You really mean that?" Carmine asked finally. "Or is this just more corporate bullshit to shut me up?" "I mean it," Dominick said. "But Carmine, I need something from you too. I need you to stop undermining my authority with the younger generation. I need you to support the transition publicly, even if you have private reservations. I need you to be an ally, not an adversary." "And if I say no?" "Then we keep fighting," Dominick said quietly. "And I win eventually, because I have youth and momentum and legitimate business leverage. But we both lose things we care about in the process. Your legacy, my family's unity, the respect we should have for each other." The silence stretched taut. Scarlett held her breath, watching decades of history and hurt and hierarchy play out in the expressions crossing Carmine's weathered face. "Your father would have just killed me for disrespecting him," Carmine said finally. "I'm not my father," Dominick said. "I'm trying to be better than what I was raised to be. But I need help. From people who know the old ways well enough to help me avoid the mistakes of thinking everything new is automatically better." Something in Carmine's expression softened. "You really do want to change things." "I really do, but I can't do it alone, and I can't do it by burning bridges with everyone who came before me." Carmine reached for his wine glass, took a long drink. When he set it down, his eyes held something that might have been respect. "Okay, we try it your way. But I'm watching, Dominick. You screw me over, we're done." "Fair enough," Dominick said, extending his hand across the table. They shook, the gesture carrying weight beyond the simple physical contact. Carmine's gaze shifted to Scarlett, his expression appraising. "You advise him on this?" he asked her. I offered perspective, Scarlett said carefully. The decision was his. Smart girl. Carmine stood, the meeting apparently concluded. You keep her, Dominick. Women like this, they see things us men miss because we're too busy protecting our pride. After Carmine left, Dominick sat back in his chair, something like relief washing over his features. I can't believe that actually worked. You gave him what he really wanted, Scarlett said. Not territory or power, but dignity and relevance. Once he felt seen and valued, the rest became negotiable. Dominick pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Thank you. For being here. For believing I could handle this differently than my father would have. You're not your father, Scarlett said softly. You're better than what you were raised to be. You just needed to prove it to yourself. He kissed her then, deep and grateful and full of emotion he didn't have words for. When they finally pulled apart, Marcus appeared in the doorway with impeccable timing. All clear, boss. We're good to go. The drive home felt different, lighter somehow, like something heavy had been lifted. Dominick kept Scarlett's hand in his thumb tracing absent patterns on her skin. Come home with me, he said quietly as they approached her building. Just to be there. I don't want to be alone tonight. Scarlett knew she should say no, should maintain boundaries, take things slow, protect herself from getting in too deep too fast. But looking at him in the dim interior of the SUV, seeing the vulnerability he was trying to hide, she couldn't bring herself to walk away. Okay, she said. But Dominick, I'm serious about taking this slowly. I'm not ready for... I know, he interrupted gently. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking to not be alone. His home was a penthouse overlooking the water, all clean lines and expensive minimalism that somehow still felt warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights reflected on the bay. The kitchen was indeed restaurant quality, all professional-grade appliances and marble countertops. Wine, Dominick offered, already moving toward the wine fridge. Please. He poured them both generous glasses of red, then gestured toward the balcony. They stood at the railing, the night air carrying the salt smell of the ocean, the city a living thing breathing below them. Tell me what you're thinking, Dominick said. That a month ago, I was married to a man I'd stopped loving, living a life I'd stopped recognizing as mine. And now I'm standing on a penthouse balcony with a man who terrifies and fascinates me in equal measure, watching him try to transform a criminal empire into something legitimate. It's surreal. Regrets? Surprisingly, no. Scarlett turned to face him. Terror, yes. Confusion, absolutely. But regrets? Not yet. Not yet, Dominick repeated. That suggests you think regrets are inevitable. Aren't they? With something this complicated? Maybe. He set down his wine glass, both hands coming up to frame her face. Or maybe we're both tired of safe and predictable, and we're choosing complicated because complicated at least feels real. Is that what this is? Choosing complicated for the sake of feeling real? No, Dominick said quietly. This is choosing you because being around you makes me want to be better than what I was raised to be. This is choosing you because you see the worst parts of my world and don't run screaming. This is choosing you because for the first time in my life, I care more about someone else's opinion than my own pride. The honesty of it stole her breath. Dominick, I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words raw and unguarded. I know it's too soon. I know you need time. I know I should be more careful with this. But I'm tired of careful, Scarlett. I'm tired of protecting myself at the cost of actually feeling something real. Scarlett felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of emotion she wasn't ready to name but couldn't deny feeling. You're not making this easy. I'm not trying to make it easy, Dominick said. I'm trying to make it honest. She kissed him because words felt inadequate, because the space between them had become unbearable, because sometimes the only honest response to truth was surrender. He responded immediately, pulling her flush against him, one hand tangling in her hair while the other settled on her waist with possessive certainty. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Scarlett rested her forehead against his chest. I can't say it back yet. I'm not ready. I know, Dominick said, his hand stroking her hair. I'm not asking you to say it. I'm just telling you where I am, what this means to me. They went inside and Dominick gave her clothes to sleep in. A t-shirt that smelled like him, soft pajama pants that she had to roll at the waist. They lay in his bed, Scarlett curled against his side, his arm around her shoulders, and talked until words became too heavy. Scarlett fell asleep feeling safer than she had in years, wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous man she'd ever known, and wondered what that said about who she was becoming. She woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. Dominick stood in the kitchen, spatula in hand, making what looked like an elaborate breakfast. You cook when you can't sleep, Scarlett said, patting over in bare feet. What's your excuse this morning? Gratitude, Dominick said simply. You stayed. You listened to me confess feelings I probably should have kept to myself. You didn't run. I wanted to do something nice for you. He'd made frittata with fresh vegetables, perfectly crispy bacon, fruit salad, and toast from what was clearly homemade bread. They ate on the balcony, the morning sun warming their skin, the city waking up below them. I need to tell you something, Scarlett said, setting down her fork. Last night, when you said you were falling in love with me, I was terrified, because I felt it too, and feeling it means this is real, and real means it can hurt in ways that staged marriages and comfortable lies never could. Dominick reached across the table, taking her hand. It can also heal in ways that safe choices never could. I know, but Dominick, I need you to understand, I'm not ready to jump into this with both feet. I need time to finish my divorce, to figure out who I am outside of being someone's wife, to make sure this is real and not just me rebounding into something that feels good because it's different from what I had. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to keep seeing you, keep getting to know you, but slowly, without pressure or expectations or timelines. Can you live with that? Dominick was quiet for a moment. Yes, because having you in my life at your pace is better than not having you at all. But Scarlett, I need something from you too. What? Honesty. If you're scared, tell me. If you need space, ask for it. If something I do or say makes you uncomfortable, say so. Don't disappear on me without explanation. Don't make me guess what's happening in your head. I can do that, Scarlett said. Then we have a deal. He lifted her hand to his mouth, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Slow and honest it is. The moment felt like a promise, and a beginning, fragile but real. And Scarlett let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she was finally building something worth the risk of falling. The next 3 weeks settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Scarlett finalized her divorce with paperwork signed in sterile conference rooms. Ethan's signature, a formality that ended 5 years with administrative efficiency. She moved out of the apartment they'd shared into a smaller place in a historic neighborhood, filling the space with furniture she actually liked, instead of pieces chosen for their social acceptability. Dominick helped her move, which resulted in Marcus and 2 other security personnel carrying boxes, while Dominick assembled furniture with the focused intensity he brought to everything. Watching him build her bookshelf, sleeves rolled up, and reading instructions with the same attention he probably gave business contracts, Scarlett felt something warm settle in her chest. You're good at this, she observed, handing him a screwdriver. My grandmother believed men should know how to build things with their hands, Dominick said, not looking up from the instruction manual. She said it kept us humble, reminded us that not everything valuable requires violence or money. She sounds like she was an incredible woman. She was the only person my grandfather truly feared, Dominick said with a slight smile, which tells you everything you need to know about her. They spent evenings together when Dominick's schedule allowed. Quiet dinners at restaurants off the tourist path, cooking together in his professional kitchen, walking along the marina while Marcus maintained discreet distance. Scarlett learned Dominick's tells, the tiny shifts in expression that indicated stress or frustration, or the rare moments when he let his guard down completely. She also learned the reality of dating someone whose life operated in shades of gray. Phone calls in Italian that made his jaw tighten. Meetings that required Marcus to do security sweeps. The constant awareness that people were watching, judging, making assumptions about who she was and what she wanted from Dominick Romano. You're trending on social media, Maya informed her over coffee one morning, sliding her phone across the table. Someone photographed you and Dominick at that gallery opening last week. The comments are brutal. Scarlett scrolled through the speculation. Gold digger, trophy girlfriend. Another conquest for the Mafia prince. Women declaring she was using him for money, or that he was using her for legitimacy, or that the whole relationship was a public relations stunt to soften his dangerous reputation. Does this bother you? Maya asked carefully. It should, Scarlett said, setting down the phone. But honestly, I've spent so many years caring what people think, performing for an imaginary audience. I'm tired of it. Let them speculate. They don't know him, and they don't know me. That's very evolved of you, Maya said, also slightly terrifying. The Scarlett I knew 6 months ago would have been devastated by this kind of public scrutiny. The Scarlett from 6 months ago was married to a man who was sleeping with someone else and too afraid to admit her life wasn't working, Scarlett said quietly. I'm trying to be someone braver than that. But the social media attention was minor compared to what came next. Scarlett arrived at her new apartment one evening to find a manila envelope taped to her door. No return address, just her name written in block letters. Inside were photographs. Her leaving Dominick's building early one morning, the 2 of them at dinner, her getting into his car. Surveillance photos taken from distance with telephoto lenses. And a note, typed and unsigned. You don't know what you're getting into. Walk away while you still can. Her hands shook as she called Dominick, who arrived with Marcus within 20 minutes, his expression thunderous. How long has this been on your door? He demanded, examining the envelope with gloved hands. I don't know. I've been out all day. Marcus was already on his phone, coordinating with building security to pull footage. Dominick pulled Scarlett into his arms, his body rigid with barely controlled fury. This is my fault, he said against her hair. I should have anticipated this. Should have increased your security detail. I don't want a security detail, Scarlett protested. I just want to live my life. Someone is watching you, Scarlett. Taking photographs, tracking your movements. That's not paranoia, that's documented threat. Marcus returned, his expression grim. No cameras in this hallway. Building security is minimal. Whoever left this knew how to avoid being seen. Who would do this? Scarlett asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. Could be anyone, Dominick said tightly. Rival families sending a message. Someone who wants to destabilize my transition to legitimate business. An enemy of my father's using you to get to me. The list is unfortunately long. Or it could be someone who genuinely thinks they're protecting me, Scarlett pointed out. Warning me away from danger. Either way, you're not staying here tonight, Dominick said with finality. Pack a bag. You're coming to my place where security is actually adequate. Scarlett wanted to argue, to insist on her independence and autonomy. But the photographs had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. The idea that someone had been watching her, following her, documenting her movements without her knowledge made her skin crawl. Okay, she agreed, but just for tonight. Tomorrow we figure out an actual solution that doesn't involve me hiding in your penthouse. The actual solution turned out to be Marcus assigning one of his team to conduct security sweeps of Scarlett's building and installing a camera system in her hallway. Dominick wanted her to move into his place permanently, but Scarlett held firm on maintaining her own space. I just got my independence back, she told him during a tense conversation in his kitchen. I can't immediately give it up by moving in with you. That's not slow. That's not careful. That's me running from fear straight into dependence on another man. This isn't about dependence, Dominick argued. It's about keeping you safe. And I appreciate that. But Dominick, I need you to hear me. If I let fear dictate my choices, I'll never actually be free. I'll just trade one cage for another, even if the new cage comes with better security and a man I'm falling in love with. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Dominick went very still, his eyes searching hers. Say that again, he said quietly. I'm falling in love with you, Scarlett repeated, her heart hammering. Which is terrifying and possibly terrible timing and definitely complicates everything. But it's true. And because it's true, I need to do this right. I need to maintain my own space, my own identity, my own life that exists separately from being your girlfriend. Dominick crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like relief and want, and promises neither of them were quite ready to make explicit. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Okay, he said. We do it your way. But you keep the security system. You check in when you get home, and if anything else happens, anything, you tell me immediately. Deal, Scarlett agreed. The photograph stopped, but the sense of being watched didn't entirely fade. Scarlett found herself checking over her shoulder, noticing cars that seemed to appear too frequently, cataloging faces in crowds. It was exhausting and infuriating, and a stark reminder that choosing Dominick meant choosing a life with complications she was still learning to navigate. But there were good things too. Dominick introduced her to his brothers at a family dinner that was simultaneously warm and slightly terrifying. Antonio, the oldest, ran several of the family's legitimate hotel properties with ruthless efficiency. Luca, the middle brother, handled restaurant operations and had their grandmother's talent for cooking. So you're the one who's got Nico cooking at 3 a.m. and smiling like an idiot, Antonio said, shaking Scarlett's hand with a grip that tested her resolve not to wince. Nico, Scarlett repeated, glancing at Dominick. Family nickname, he said with a slight grimace. My mother refused to call me Dominick because it was too formal. It's good to see him happy, Luca added, his assessment more gentle than Antonio's aggressive charm. He's been alone too long, caring too much. The dinner was loud and chaotic, filled with arguing in Italian and English, multiple courses that kept appearing from the kitchen, children running between rooms while the adults debated everything from politics to the proper way to make carbonara. Dominick's mother, Elena, held court at the head of the table, an elegant woman in her 60s who assessed Scarlett with sharp eyes. You're the event planner, Elena said, not quite a question. Yes, ma'am, Scarlett confirmed, the one who saved the charity gala when that reporter tried to make trouble. I just did my job. You protected my son's reputation in front of 300 influential people, Elena corrected. That's not just doing a job. That's choosing to stand beside him when it would have been easier to step back. The observation was weighted with meaning Scarlett only partially understood. He's worth standing beside. Elena's expression softened almost imperceptibly. My husband, Dominick's father, was a hard man. Violent, unforgiving. He built an empire on fear and it killed him before he turned 60. Dominick is trying to be different, to build something that won't destroy him the way it destroyed Marco. But that transformation requires courage from everyone around him. I'm not sure I'm that courageous, Scarlett admitted. You're here, Elena said simply. Knowing what you know about our family, about the life Dominick comes from, that's courage enough. After dinner, Dominick found Scarlett on the back patio, escaping the noise for a moment of quiet. He handed her a glass of wine and settled beside her on the bench. That was intense, Scarlett said. That was my family on good behavior, Dominick corrected with dry humor. You should see us when we're actually arguing about something important. Your mother is formidable. She held my father's empire together when he was too busy being brutal to be strategic, Dominick said. She's the reason we survived the transition when he died, the reason I had space to start changing how we operate. She loves you, Scarlett observed. All of you. It's in every word she speaks, every look she gives. She does, Dominick agreed, fiercely, completely, in ways my father never quite managed. He turned to face her fully. What did she say to you, before dinner? That you're trying to be different from your father, that it requires courage from everyone around you. And are you feeling courageous? Scarlett considered the question honestly. Some days. Other days I'm terrified I'm making a huge mistake. But even on the terrified days, I don't want to walk away. So maybe that's courage. Or maybe it's just stubbornness. Either way, I'm grateful for it, Dominick said, pulling her close. They sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of his family drifting through the open windows, laughter and arguing, and the particular chaos of people who loved each other deeply enough to forgive almost anything. Scarlett felt something shift inside her, a recognition that this was what she'd been missing in her marriage to Ethan. Not perfection or polish, but genuine connection. Messy, complicated, real. The peace lasted exactly 3 more days before everything shattered. Scarlett was leaving a meeting with the Children's Hospital Foundation when she noticed the car, a dark sedan with tinted windows, idling across the street. When she walked toward her own car, the sedan's passenger window rolled down. Ms. Vaughn, a man's voice called. We need to talk. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to call Marcus, to get somewhere public and safe. But curiosity and the reckless bravery that Dominick kept inspiring made her approach the car, staying far enough back that she could bolt if necessary. Who are you? She asked. Agent John Chen, FBI. He held up credentials that looked official, though Scarlett had no idea how to verify their authenticity. I need to speak with you about Dominick Romano. Then speak to him directly. I'm not discussing him with strangers in parking lots. We've tried speaking to Mr. Romano, Agent Chen said with dry humor. He has very good lawyers who prevent us from having productive conversations. But you, Ms. Vaughn, you're not protected by those same lawyers. You're just a civilian who's gotten involved with a dangerous man, probably without understanding the full scope of his activities. I'm also a civilian who knows better than to talk to federal agents without legal representation, Scarlett said coldly. If you have questions for me, contact my attorney and schedule a proper meeting. We're building a case against the Romano family, Chen said, abandoning the friendly approach for blunt intimidation. Money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy charges that go back decades. Right now, you're just a girlfriend. But if you become more involved, if you start helping him hide assets or provide alibis or participate in any way, you become an accessory. You could face charges yourself. The threat was clear and carefully calibrated. Scarlett felt her heart rate spike, but she kept her voice steady. Are you threatening me, Agent Chen? I'm warning you, he corrected. Walk away from Dominick Romano while you still can, before you're in too deep to extract yourself without consequences. Thank you for the warning, Scarlett said with icy politeness. Now if you'll excuse me, I have places to be. She walked to her car with measured steps, refusing to show fear or urgency. Only when she was safely inside with the doors locked did she allow herself to shake. She called Dominick immediately. I just got approached by an FBI agent in the hospital parking lot. The silence on the other end was thunderous. Then, very quietly, what did he say? Scarlett repeated the conversation verbatim, her lawyer training kicking in to recall exact phrasing and implications. When she finished, Dominick's voice was tight with controlled fury. Where are you now? Still in the parking lot. Stay there. Marcus is 10 minutes away. He'll follow you to my office. We need to talk to my lawyers immediately. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal consultations. Marcus and another security specialist reviewing parking lot footage that showed the FBI vehicle, but not much else useful, and Dominick making phone calls in Italian that sounded increasingly frustrated. They're escalating, his lawyer, a sharp woman named Victoria Cross, explained. The approach in a parking lot is designed to intimidate you without the formal process of an interview request. They're hoping you'll panic and provide information voluntarily. What kind of information? Scarlett asked. Anything they can use to build their case against the Romano family. Financial transactions, business discussions, admissions about illegal activities. Victoria's expression was sympathetic but firm. Ms. Vaughn, I need to ask you directly. Have you witnessed or participated in anything that could be construed as illegal activity? No, Scarlett said honestly. I planned a charity gala. I've attended family dinners and business meetings about legitimate hotel and restaurant operations. I've seen nothing illegal. Good. Then here's what you need to know. You have no obligation to speak with the FBI without legal representation. If they approach you again, you politely decline to answer questions and immediately contact me. Do not try to defend Dominick. Do not try to explain anything. Do not let them convince you that cooperation will help. Because it won't help, Scarlett guessed. Because anything you say can be twisted to fit their narrative, Victoria corrected. The FBI has been investigating the Romano family for years. They know Dominick is transitioning to legitimate business, which actually makes him more dangerous to them. Harder to prosecute, but still connected enough to potentially provide evidence against others in the organization. You represent a potential pressure point. After the lawyers left, Scarlett found Dominick standing at his office windows, his posture rigid with tension. She crossed to him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. Talk to me, she said quietly. I'm putting you in danger, Dominick said, his voice raw. The photographs, the FBI, the constant scrutiny. This is exactly what I was afraid of when I told you about my world. You deserve better than being treated as leverage against me. I deserve to make my own choices about acceptable risk, Scarlett corrected. And I choose this. I choose you. Even with the complications. Dominick turned in her arms, his hands coming up to frame her face. You could walk away. The FBI is giving you a clear exit. Take it, and you go back to your normal life, safe, uncomplicated. And alone, Scarlett added, living half a life again, avoiding risk and real feeling because it's safer that way. She met his eyes steadily. I didn't walk away from my marriage to Ethan just to retreat back into safety and pretense. I walked away to find something real. And this, with you, is the most real thing I've felt in years. Even knowing the FBI is building a case that they might try to use you against me? They can try, Scarlett said with more confidence than she felt. But I know a few things about not being manipulated by powerful people. I spent 5 years being married to a lawyer who tried to make me feel small and grateful for his attention. I'm done letting other people's agendas dictate my choices. Something fierce and possessive flashed in Dominick's eyes. He kissed her hard, desperate, like he was trying to convince himself she was real and choosing to stay. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I know we're supposed to be taking this slow, but I need you to know I am completely, irrevocably in love with you. I love you too, Scarlett whispered, the admission feeling both terrifying and inevitable, which is probably terrible timing given that the FBI just threatened me, but it's true. Dominick laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. Terrible timing seems to be our specialty. They stood wrapped in each other while the city glittered below them, both understanding that they'd crossed another threshold. The FBI's involvement changed everything and nothing. The risk was real now, documented and official. But so was what they felt for each other, and Scarlett refused to let fear dictate surrender. What happens next? She asked. We prepare for the fact that they'll keep coming, Dominick said. Victoria will file formal complaints about the parking lot approach. We'll document everything, build our own case for harassment if necessary. And we'll be careful about what we discuss in public, about who might be listening, about keeping you as separate from actual business operations as possible. That sounds exhausting. It is, Dominick agreed. Welcome to my world. But even as he said it, his arms tightened around her, and Scarlett understood that this was the bargain they were making. Risk and reality in exchange for genuine connection. Danger and scrutiny in exchange for love that didn't require performance or pretense. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, standing outside hotel room 412, watching her marriage die in silence. That woman would have been terrified of this moment, of the FBI and the danger and the complications. This woman, the one who'd walked away from safety, who'd built something extraordinary in 2 weeks, who'd learned to trust her own strength, this woman looked at the challenges ahead and felt ready. Not fearless, not naive about the risks, but ready to face them for something worth fighting for. I need to tell you something, she said, pulling back slightly to look at him. When Agent Chen approached me, my first thought wasn't fear or panic. It was anger. Fury that someone thought they could use me as leverage against you, that they saw me as weak or manipulable. You're the furthest thing from weak, Dominick said. I know that now, Scarlett said, but I didn't always. I let Ethan make me feel small for years. I let social expectations and fear of judgment dictate my choices. But standing in that parking lot, listening to a federal agent try to scare me into abandoning you, I realized something. I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting other people's fear or disapproval or threats determine my path. That's a dangerous realization, Dominick observed. Maybe, Scarlett agreed, but it's also freeing. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm actually choosing my own destiny, instead of just accepting the one other people think I should have. Dominick kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. Then we face whatever comes together. The FBI, the scrutiny, the dangers I can't entirely protect you from. All of it. Together, Scarlett confirmed. They ordered dinner from Dominick's favorite Italian place and ate on his balcony, talking about everything and nothing. Future plans and past regrets, dreams deferred and hopes rekindled. The conversation flowed easy and natural, punctuated by laughter and comfortable silence, and Scarlett felt the last of her reservations dissolve. This was real. This was worth the risk. And whatever came next, she would face it with her eyes open and her heart finally willing to be vulnerable. When her phone buzzed with a text from Maya asking if she was okay, apparently the social media gossip mills had somehow gotten wind of the FBI involvement. Scarlett typed back a response that felt like truth. I'm better than okay. I'm finally living instead of just surviving. Dominick read over her shoulder and smiled. Your friend is worried about you. My friend has been worried about me for years, Scarlett said. But for the first time, I think those worries are actually unfounded. I'm not the same person who needed protecting anymore. No, Dominick agreed, pulling her close. You're the woman who protected me at that gala, who negotiated peace with Carmine when violence would have been easier, who faced down the FBI in a parking lot and came out angry instead of afraid. You're extraordinary, Scarlett Vaughn, and I'm the luckiest man alive that you chose to be extraordinary with me. Later, lying in his bed with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Scarlett felt peace settle over her. Not the false peace of avoidance or denial, but the real peace of acceptance. She'd chosen this path knowing the risks. She'd chosen Dominick knowing his world was complicated and dangerous, and would never be entirely safe. But safe had never made her happy. Safe had been a cage gilded with social acceptance and empty promises. This, dangerous, complicated, real, this made her feel alive. And that, Scarlett thought as sleep pulled her under, was worth every risk she'd taken and every challenge still to come. The FBI's next move came 2 weeks later, but not in the way anyone expected. Scarlett was at a Children's Hospital Foundation board meeting. When Victoria called, her voice tight with controlled urgency. They've subpoenaed you to testify before a grand jury. They're investigating financial irregularities in several of Dominick's hotel acquisitions. They want you to provide testimony about your knowledge of his business practices. Scarlett's stomach dropped. Around her, the board members continued discussing fundraising targets, oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated in her life. She excused herself quietly and stepped into the hallway. When? She asked. 3 weeks. I'm filing a motion to quash the subpoena, but Scarlett, I need you to be realistic. They have the right to call witnesses. Unless you're claiming spousal privilege, which you can't because you're not married, there's limited legal ground to prevent your testimony. What happens if I refuse? Contempt charges. Possible jail time. Victoria's tone was sympathetic but firm. This isn't a voluntary interview you can decline. This is a legal summons. Scarlett leaned against the wall, her mind racing. What do they think I know? That's the question. Either they genuinely believe you have information about illegal activity, or they're using the grand jury subpoena to pressure Dominick. Make him choose between protecting you and protecting himself. That's not a choice he should have to make, Scarlett said quietly. Then we prepare you to testify truthfully without providing information they can weaponize, Victoria said. I'll send you a prep schedule. Clear your calendar for the next 2 weeks. We have work to do. Dominick was in Chicago for business meetings when Scarlett called him. She heard the exact moment the news registered, a sharp intake of breath, then silence, heavy with implications. I'm coming home, he said finally. Your meetings can wait. This can't. His voice was steel-wrapped in concern. Scarlett, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever Victoria tells you to do, you do exactly that. You don't try to protect me. You don't lie for me. You answer every question truthfully and let the chips fall where they may. Dominick? I mean it, he interrupted. I won't let you perjure yourself or risk contempt charges trying to shield me. If they ask about my business, you tell them what you know. If they ask about our relationship, you tell the truth. I'll handle the consequences. The fact that he was willing to accept those consequences rather than ask her to lie told Scarlett everything she needed to know about his character. But it also terrified her because the truth was she didn't actually know much about his business operations. And admitting that ignorance might make her look either complicit or willfully blind. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Victoria drilled her on grand jury procedures, on how to answer questions precisely without volunteering extra information, on the difference between I don't know and I don't recall. They reviewed every interaction Scarlett had witnessed between Dominick and business associates, every conversation about hotel acquisitions and financial transactions, building a timeline of her actual knowledge versus speculation or assumption. The key, Victoria explained, is that you only testify to what you personally witnessed or heard, not what you think happened, not what Dominick might have told you in private, just your direct, first-hand knowledge. Which is almost nothing, Scarlett said, frustration bleeding into her voice. I planned one event. I've attended family dinners and gone to restaurants. I haven't been in business meetings, or reviewed financial documents, or witnessed anything actually illegal. Then that's what you tell them, Victoria said. The prosecutor will try to make your lack of knowledge seem suspicious, like you're deliberately avoiding the truth. Don't let them rattle you. Just calmly, consistently repeat what you do and don't know. Dominick, to his credit, gave her space to prepare while making sure she knew he was there if she needed him. He sent flowers to her apartment with notes that made her smile. He had food delivered when Victoria's prep sessions ran late. He called every night just to hear her voice, never pressuring her to discuss the testimony, just offering comfort and normalcy. I miss you, she told him one night, exhausted from another 8-hour prep session. I'm right here, Dominick said softly. Always. No matter what happens with the grand jury. What if they indict you? Then my lawyers fight it. That's what they're paid excessive amounts of money to do. He paused. Scarlett, I need you to understand something. Whatever happens with this investigation, it's not your fault. You didn't cause it by being with me. The FBI has been building this case for years, long before I met you. But they're using me as leverage. They're trying to, Dominick corrected. Whether they succeed depends on how we respond, and we respond by telling the truth, and trusting that the truth, that my businesses are increasingly legitimate, that I'm transitioning away from my family's criminal past, will be evident. The night before her grand jury testimony, Scarlett couldn't sleep. She stood on her apartment balcony at 2 a.m., watching the city breathe and glow, thinking about the woman she'd been when this all started. The woman who'd stood outside hotel room 412 and watched her marriage die. That woman had been afraid of risk, of judgment, of choosing wrong and facing consequences. This woman, the one who'd testify under oath tomorrow about her relationship with a man whose family was connected to organized crime. This woman had learned that some risks were worth taking, that living authentically meant accepting consequences, that love didn't require certainty, just courage. Her phone buzzed. Dominick, unable to sleep either. Whatever happens tomorrow, I love you. That doesn't change. She typed back, I love you too. See you on the other side of this. The grand jury room was smaller than Scarlett expected, filled with ordinary-looking people who'd been randomly selected for civic duty and probably had no idea they'd be hearing testimony about organized crime. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s named Sarah Mitchell, had the tired eyes of someone who'd spent years fighting battles that never quite ended in victory. Ms. Vaughn, she began after the preliminary oath and identification questions, how did you meet Dominick Romano? Scarlett took a breath and began. She told the truth about the charity gala, about being hired as event director, about the professional relationship that had evolved into something personal. She answered questions about what she'd witnessed at family dinners, which was nothing more incriminating than arguments about restaurant recipes and who owed whom money from a poker game. Did Mr. Romano ever discuss his family's criminal activities with you? Mitchell asked. He discussed his family's history, Scarlett said carefully. He acknowledged that his grandfather and father were involved in organized crime. He told me he was working to transition the family businesses to legitimate operations, hotels, restaurants, real estate. Did he tell you how he was funding these legitimate businesses? No, I'm not involved in his business operations. I don't review financial documents or attend business meetings. Isn't that convenient? Mitchell's tone sharpened. You're in a relationship with a man whose family is under federal investigation, but you claim to know nothing about how he actually makes money? Victoria had warned her about this tactic, the insinuation that ignorance was actually complicity. Scarlett kept her voice steady. I know he owns hotels and restaurants. I know he employs hundreds of people in legitimate positions. I know the charity gala I planned raised significant money for children's cancer research through transparent, documented donations. Beyond that, no. I don't know the details of his financial operations because I'm his girlfriend, not his business partner or accountant. Have you ever witnessed Mr. Romano engaging in illegal activity? No. Have you ever witnessed meetings between Mr. Romano and known criminal associates? Scarlett thought about Carmine, about the dinner where Dominick had negotiated peace instead of violence. I attended one dinner where Mr. Romano met with a man named Carmine DeLuca, who I understand worked with his father. They discussed transitioning to legitimate business practices and finding roles for people with traditional organized crime backgrounds in legal operations. And you found nothing suspicious about that conversation? I found it encouraging, Scarlett said honestly. It suggested Mr. Romano was actively working to move away from criminal activity, not deeper into it. Mitchell spent another hour probing for inconsistencies, trying to find gaps in Scarlett's testimony that might indicate hidden knowledge or deliberate deception. But the truth was simple and consistent. Scarlett had witnessed a man trying to transform his family's empire, had seen legitimate business operations and charitable work, and had never been privy to anything actually illegal. When the testimony finally ended, Scarlett felt wrung out but relieved. She'd told the truth. She'd protected herself from perjury charges. And she'd done it without betraying Dominick or fabricating ignorance she didn't actually possess. Victoria was waiting in the hallway, along with Marcus, and to Scarlett's surprise, Dominick himself. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, walking into his arms despite the federal building setting. "I needed to be close," he said against her hair. "How did it go?" "I told the truth, all of it. Whether that helps or hurts you, I don't know." "It helps," Victoria said firmly. "Your testimony was consistent with everything we've documented about Dominick's transition to legitimate business. It actually supports our narrative that he's distancing himself from criminal activity." They left the federal building together, Marcus running interference when reporters shouted questions about the investigation. Scarlett kept her head high and her hand in Dominick's, refusing to look ashamed or afraid. Whatever happened next, she'd face this challenge with integrity intact. But the real surprise came 3 days later when Victoria called with unexpected news. The grand jury declined to indict, she said, barely contained triumph in her voice. No charges against Dominick, no charges against any of the family businesses they were investigating. The FBI's case apparently fell apart when they couldn't demonstrate ongoing criminal activity, just historical connections and speculation about current operations. Scarlett felt relief so profound it made her dizzy. "It's over?" "This investigation is over," Victoria corrected. "The FBI will probably keep watching, keep looking for evidence. But for now, yes, the immediate threat is resolved." She found Dominick in his office, staring out those inevitable windows at the city he'd fought so hard to claim legitimately. When she told him the news, he didn't celebrate or gloat. He just pulled her close and breathed like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for standing with me through this, for not running when the FBI came calling, for being brave enough to testify truthfully instead of trying to protect me with lies." "I didn't do it to protect you," Scarlett said. "I did it to protect us, to protect the future we're trying to build together." "About that future," Dominick said, pulling back to look at her. "I have something I need to ask you, something I probably should have waited to ask, but recent events have reminded me that tomorrow isn't guaranteed." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Scarlett's heart stopped. "I bought this 3 weeks ago," Dominick said, opening the box to reveal a stunning ring, emerald-cut diamond set in platinum, simple and elegant and breathtaking. "Before the grand jury subpoena, before the FBI's investigation concluded. Because I knew, regardless of what happened with the legal situation, that I wanted to spend my life with you." "Dominick, let me finish," he said gently. "I know this is fast. I know we've only been together for a few months. I know conventional wisdom says we should wait longer. Make sure this is real and not just intensity mistaken for love. But Scarlett, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You make me want to be better than what I was raised to be. You see the man I'm trying to become instead of just the criminal legacy I'm trying to escape. And I don't want to waste time being cautious when I could be building a life with you." Scarlett felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was offering. Marriage, partnership, a future built on truth and choice instead of performance and obligation. "This isn't pressure," Dominick continued. "If you need more time, if you want to wait until your divorce is further in the past, if you want to date longer before making this commitment, I understand. The ring isn't a demand, it's a promise. That I'm here, that I'm yours, that whenever you're ready, I'll be waiting." "I don't want you to wait," Scarlett said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I don't want to be cautious anymore. I spent too many years being careful, and it got me a marriage that was dying before I even noticed. With you, I feel alive. Challenged. Seen. And yes, it's fast and probably crazy, and definitely not what any rational person would advise. But I don't care about rational anymore. I care about real, and this is the most real thing I've ever felt." "Is that a yes?" Dominick asked, hope and vulnerability mixing in his expression. "That's a yes," Scarlett confirmed. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll build this crazy, complicated, beautiful life with you. Yes to all of it." He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Then he kissed her with a joy so pure it made her laugh against his mouth, and Scarlett felt every last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't the woman who'd stood outside hotel room 412 anymore. She wasn't even the woman who'd planned a charity gala to prove her worth. She was Scarlett Vaughn, soon to be Scarlett Romano, and she was finally, completely herself. The wedding happened 6 months later in the private gardens of Dominick's estate, the same place where he'd first told her he loved her. Scarlett wore ivory silk that Maya had helped her choose, simple and elegant, and nothing like the elaborate dress she'd worn for her first wedding. This time, she wasn't performing for cameras or trying to meet expectations. She was just a woman marrying the man she loved. Maya stood as her maid of honor, tears streaming down her face as she adjusted Scarlett's veil. "I can't believe this is happening. 6 months ago, you were crying in my guest room about your divorce. Now you're marrying a man who looks at you like you hung the moon." "I can't believe it either," Scarlett admitted. "But Maya, I've never been more certain of anything." The ceremony was small, just family and close friends, people who knew the real story behind the headlines and gossip. Dominick's mother cried through the entire service. His brothers stood as groomsmen, both looking vaguely emotional despite their attempts at stoicism. Carmine sat in the front row, nodding approval like he'd personally orchestrated the whole relationship. When Dominick saw Scarlett walking down the aisle, his expression broke open with something so raw and genuine it made her stumble. Marcus, standing next to him as best man, steadied him with a hand on his shoulder, and Scarlett heard him whisper something that made Dominick laugh and wipe his eyes. The vows they'd written themselves were simple and honest, promises to choose each other daily, to face challenges together, to build something better than what they'd each come from. When Dominick slipped the wedding band next to her engagement ring, his hand shook slightly, and Scarlett loved him even more for that visible emotion. "I love you," he whispered, just for her. "Thank you for choosing me, for seeing past the reputation to the man underneath, for being brave enough to build this life with me." "I love you too," Scarlett whispered back. "Thank you for showing me that real love doesn't require performance or perfection, just honesty and courage." The reception was everything the gala had been, and nothing like it at the same time. Same beautiful venue, same attention to detail, but this time Scarlett wasn't working. She was celebrating. She danced with Dominick under string lights that turned the garden magical. She laughed with Maya and traded stories with Dominick's brothers, and accepted Elena's tearful embrace when his mother pulled her aside. "You're good for him," Elena said. "You make him remember that there's more to life than business and obligation. You make him happy." "He makes me happy too," Scarlett said. "He makes me brave." As the evening wore down and guests began departing, Scarlett found herself back on the balcony where they'd had so many important conversations. Dominick joined her, his jacket discarded and tie loosened, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "What are you thinking?" he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "That a year ago, I was trapped in a marriage that was slowly killing who I actually was. And now I'm married to a man who makes me feel more myself than I've ever been. It's surreal." "Good surreal or bad surreal?" "The best surreal," Scarlett said, turning to face him. "Dominick, I need to tell you something. When I walked out of that hotel room after finding Ethan, I felt free for the first time in years. But I also felt lost. Like I'd been playing a role for so long, I didn't know who I actually was underneath the performance. These past months with you, they've been about discovering that person. The woman who's brave enough to face FBI interrogations and strong enough to stand beside you without losing herself. I like who I am with you. I like who we are together." "I like who we are together too," Dominick said softly. "And Scarlett, we're just getting started, building the foundation for something that will last, something real and true and worth every risk we took to find each other." They stood wrapped in each other as the party wound down below them, the garden slowly emptying of guests until only family remained. Marcus appeared eventually to let them know the last guest had departed, his expression warm with something that might have been paternal pride. "Congratulations, boss," he said. "You did good." "We did good," Dominick corrected, his hand finding Scarlett's. "All of us, building something better than what came before." Later, alone in the master suite of Dominick's estate, Scarlett stood at the window looking out at the ocean stretching dark and endless under the stars. She thought about transformation and risk and the courage it took to choose authentic happiness over comfortable misery. She thought about the woman in hotel room 412, the one who'd walked away from betrayal with her dignity intact, but her heart still locked away. That woman had been afraid to want anything too much, afraid that desire itself was dangerous. This woman, The one wearing Dominick's ring and his name, the one who'd faced down federal investigators and family complications and her own fears. This woman had learned that desire wasn't dangerous. Fear of desire was dangerous. Choosing safety over truth was dangerous. Living half a life to avoid the risk of heartbreak was the most dangerous choice of all. Dominick came up behind her, his arms sliding around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked simply. "Terrified," Scarlett admitted, "and exhilarated, and more certain than I've ever been that I made the right choice." "Good," Dominick said, "because you're stuck with me now, Mrs. Romano." Mrs. Romano. The name still felt strange, but in the best way. Not like putting on someone else's identity, but like claiming a new part of herself. The part that was brave enough to love openly, strong enough to stand beside power without being diminished, wise enough to know that real partnership meant two whole people choosing each other daily. "I'm stuck with you," Scarlett agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "And you're stuck with me, with all my complications and fears and the learning curve of navigating your world." "Our world now," Dominick corrected. "We're building it together. Something better than what either of us came from. Something worth the risk of falling." And standing there in his arms, with the ocean breathing outside and the future stretching vast and uncertain before them, Scarlett realized something profound. She wasn't afraid of falling anymore. She'd already fallen, completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly, and discovered that Dominick had fallen too, that they'd caught each other. That love didn't require safety or certainty, just two people brave enough to keep choosing each other, despite the risks. The night she'd discovered her husband's betrayal hadn't destroyed her. It had freed her to find something real. And now, standing beside the most powerful man in the city, not as property, not as conquest, but as his chosen partner, Scarlett understood that the best things in life required the courage to risk everything. She'd risked her comfortable life for authenticity. She'd risked her safety for genuine love. She'd risked her reputation for a man who saw her not as she pretended to be, but as she actually was. And in return, she'd gained everything she'd been too afraid to want. A partnership built on truth, a love that didn't require performance, a future she was building on her own terms with a man who made her brave enough to become who she was always meant to be. Dominick kissed her softly, reverently, like she was something precious that he still couldn't quite believe was his. And Scarlett kissed him back with all the courage and love and fierce joy she'd discovered in herself over these transformative months. The woman who'd walked out of hotel room 412 had been looking for freedom. The woman who'd married Dominick Romano had found it, not in being alone, but in being seen, chosen, and loved exactly as she was. And that, Scarlett thought, as Dominick swept her into his arms and carried her toward the bed with laughter and promises for tomorrow, was the best kind of freedom of all. The kind you chose for yourself. The kind you built with someone brave enough to stand beside you. The kind that transformed betrayal's bitter ending into love's perfect beginning.